Modern life is conspiring to ruin your romantic relationships. From the pill to the red pill, dating apps, crumbling gender norms, social media, weed, porn, aimlessness, all of it together is a disastrous cocktail. There are really goofy ass people in the red pill community.
The people saying these things haven't spent enough time around women.
There really is a simple path to sexual success and success in finding a real lasting partnership. Here to talk about it is relationship expert and massive YouTuber, Matthew Hussey. The volume and velocity of terrible dating advice that I see the internet giving men is astonishing. What do you think men are getting wrong about the game of seduction?
When I think of what men are getting wrong, I see a lot of anger that I find concerning.
What do you think is driving that?
It's almost a combination of, there's like a sense of entitlement, I think, to it, of I should be able to have this, but I'm not able to have that. And there's also discrepancy between what people, let's say what women are saying they want versus what they go for, which I think pains a lot of people to see and creates a lot of cynicism. This idea that I'm not wanted for this version of myself, but I'm wanted when I'm a more aggressive or worse version of myself. When I hit a certain age, or when they hit a certain age, I am suddenly visible in a way that I wasn't before. But am I visible for reasons that I think are good? Or am I now visible because this person's coming from a place of scarcity, or they now want safety and I represent safety, but I resent representing safety because I want to be wanted for the same reasons you wanted that person over there, but I'm not seen that way. So I think there's a lot of guys who feel steamrolled.
What?
Like they gave their best to someone or something, or really tried, and it wasn't good enough, or it wasn't, the person they were with still ended up wanting something that was more superficial, or someone who is stereotypically hot or masculine or whatever it may be. And, if you've been with someone who has accepted a lot from you, like taken a lot, and you bent over backwards almost in good faith in a way that this was what they wanted, and that if you were just more compromising, if you were just more sacrificing, if you just gave more to this person, that if you just, when I'm describing all these things, I feel like I'm describing so many women too, so it's funny, but that this person will see how indispensable I am, and then that person walks all over them and leaves anyway, and goes for someone who doesn't do half as much. That, I think, creates a lot of anger.
So what is that dynamic? Why is there a gap between, and I'll say you're describing the nice guy, and I don't necessarily mean that in the like hyper toxic way that it becomes the nice guy who's really using I think they call it the sneaky fucker strategy, where they basically pretend, there's real animals that do this that will look like females. They look like the female of the species so that they can get past the alpha male that guards the females. They get past by literally looking like a female, and then they mate. So that is a very toxic version, but I don't think that's what you're referring to. I would say right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but a guy who is legitimately more genteel by nature, and so he's getting hit by something that he's confused by.
Yeah, and maybe just feels overlooked. There's a book I want to read that I'm saddened I haven't read before this interview, but there's a book I want to read, and I forget, it's by a Japanese author, but I think there's a moment where a monk or a guy destroys the temple that he thinks is so amazing and so beautiful, and there's some idea there with hating the thing that we desire. And I think that there is a significant amount of that too, of like, it's easy to end up hating the thing that you want the most, especially if you feel like that thing has control over you. if it has power over you, if it, you know, if you don't feel like you call the shots, then you can end up really resenting that thing that you really, really want. And so I feel like there's this fine line between wanting it so badly and then ending up on the anger side of that because it's not panned out the way that you would have hoped. And I'm curious to know what you think in terms of hypocrisies that maybe make a lot of guys angry, that I'm sure on some level feed into it. There's lots of narratives being played out around that stuff. When I look at a lot of the anger out there, it always seems like there's a real sense of story around it that makes people even more angry about what they've decided every person on this earth is like or wants. And it's the stories they've arrived at, all like maybe some of them have arrived at them in a data-driven way, or at least in an empirical way where they just go, this has been my experience my whole life and I can find lots and lots of evidence for it. There always seems to be a real strand of story and othering.
Meaning they're telling themselves a story about what it means that they're being treated that way.
Yes, and what every woman is like, and what every woman wants, and so on and so on. Yeah.
It's interesting. So to me, this is entirely a game of what is. So I was the guy that I think you're describing who is maybe a little too genteel by nature. And so there is a discrepancy between my instinct and maybe what I thought society was telling me a guy should be, and then what actually makes somebody desirable. I think there's a really terrifying cocktail of things that's happening right now. If you look at the red pill community and the things that they're trying to push, there's such a grounding of usefulness, but it spills over into these hard and fast rules. And so I think about, what's your aim? The red pill community's aim is to dominate women. Now, I don't know that they would agree with that statement, but I'm prepared to debate that statement. Whereas I think the ultimate punchline is you should be looking for somebody that's your equal, that you're contending with. They're not going to be the same as you, but you have to understand what women want versus what you think they want. And so if you can play the game, this is the way the world is versus this is the way I wish the world were, then you can get a lot farther ahead. So getting mad and spiraling out of control because people have a nature, guys have a nature, women have a nature. If you can understand that, then you can navigate it. And there's a reason that I called it the game of seduction. For me, it became almost funny once I understood what it took to seduce a woman. And I use the word game because it's playful. It should feel light. It should feel fun. Like, it shouldn't feel like you're trying to pull a fast one or anything. Like, you're trying to get to a level of confidence where you can be at ease, you can be playful, you can accept. There's a book called A Billion Wicked Thoughts, which I highly encourage everybody that can hear my voice right now to read. And in it, they look at the difference between what men go for from a pornographic search standpoint and what women go for. And women go for, it's like vampires, billionaires, surgeons, werewolves, and I think I'm missing one. But like every novel, because that's women's pornography, is the romance novel. Every novel, if I didn't say billionaire, that's one of them. They all have that as the lead character. Now, once you understand that, okay, they want to tame a powerful and dangerous man with their sexuality. Like, once you understand what cues then they would be looking for in a man, then it's like, oh, okay, cool, I get this game. Now, yes, you're going to have to become that kind of person if you want to play this game well. But if you see it as a game of, I have to understand the rules, I have to understand, I do not want to use the word opponent, my dance partner, because that's really what this is. I have to understand my dance partner and how they're operating and what they look for and what they want. But if I understand that, I can play this game well. Women say that they want one thing, but then they select something else. What's that gap?
So much of what drives attraction is more charisma than those things. I think that it's a kind of the idea that the rich guy gets all the attention is quickly undermined by how much a woman will pay more attention to someone who's charismatic in a room than the guy who is like, flaunting how much wealth they have. Like that's a very, very important driver for so many people, is like, who's got something about them in the way that they carry themselves. And I sometimes, maybe I'm wrong because I'm not deep in that community, but it sometimes feels like there's too much emphasis on women want a guy with power, women want a guy with, status or with money. I have no doubt that some of that is true for some people, but I think charisma also, like someone who's got a certain charm about them, plays a very, very key role in that too. And maybe in some cases a bigger role, honestly. Kind of, I don't know what the movie equivalent would be, like Titanic. Kate Winslet's less interested, I get it, that it's a movie, but Kate Winslet is less interested in her rich guy on the top deck than she is in Leonardo DiCaprio being this sort of charming, charismatic guy who's bringing something else into her life.
What's the something else? Because I think in the answer to that question lies what everyone is trying to figure out.
That something else is a kind of ability to be really intensely, immersively yourself. But I don't mean that in the way that, like be yourself. I mean, like, there's something very compelling about someone. I think that like this with content online. When someone creates content in a way that feels very uniquely them, and they are willing to bring their kind of quirks and who they are to the table in a very bold and unashamed way, there is something about that that is extremely appealing. I think that's part of your appeal. I think that there is a thumbprint to you that is uniquely you, that is unashamedly you, and it makes you someone who's very magnetic. And it's not a kind of magnetic appeal that's easy for someone else to replicate, because it's just very much you. And I really believe that when someone is able to, we can go broad and go when, I think, let me go broad for a minute. I think one of the things that makes us attractive is unique pairings. So when you are someone who is highly sensitive and can bring the best of sensitivity to the table, but you also can go into caveman mode, whether it's in the bedroom or just in life in general, there's a real, to me, the contrast is extremely attractive. It's the juxtaposition between two things that you don't normally find in the same person. It's the same as someone who on a date can go very, very deep with you, but then can be goofy and make you laugh. That's a unique pairing. And when you find unique pairings, there's something instantly alluring about that person. So I think that there are unique pairings that make people very, very attractive. To me, there's always something about someone who is really unashamedly leaning into who they are and what they're into and what they're like and the way they see the world, that does more than just showcase the individuality of that person. It speaks to us, I think, on a deeper level. We see something that we want to attain for ourselves. And we would like to be bold enough or brave enough to be that much ourselves as that person is themselves. And so I think that instantly we start to wonder what's making that, how did they do that? What makes them that confident? How are they so present with who they are? And I think that is almost a less spoken about thing that makes people very magnetically attractive. And I think it often makes people attractive that we wouldn't necessarily assume would be the most attractive people in the room. But when you get in a room with them, you kind of get it. You get what it is about that person. And you would never see it in a picture. Again, it's, I think, one of the reasons why I struggle with some of the explanations that are put out about why some people feel like they're getting no results or it's not working for them. Because I just feel like it's more interesting than that. I think it's more interesting than whether someone is 6'3" and, has a certain body and a certain level of looks and all of that. I really do. I've seen it.
Yeah, I would say there is no doubt that if you stop at the things that you can put into a dating app, you're really going to be in trouble. You'll have a trophy. You'll have something that other people look at and say, "Oh my God, like that's amazing. He's so good looking," or "She's so hot," or "Oh my God, he's rich. This must be amazing." But going back to what you were talking about with Leo and Titanic, charisma, I think, is the right answer. So I think the reason that the red pill ends up getting it wrong, but there's so much right there that people cannot help but be attracted to it.
What the right is.
So the right is, I want you to imagine that I give you a black bag, and in the black bag is a thing. And all you can do, because you can't see inside of it, all you can do is reach in and sort of feel around. And so what they're saying is there's really thick skin. There's a really long, rubbery nose. There are gigantic ears. All of that's true. But it's missing the fact that this is an elephant. And once you get to this is an elephant and you understand the complexities of that and you understand what that means and you understand how their social dynamics are and all of that, that's far more useful than it's got a trunk and big ears and thick skin, and all those are true, but you really have to take in the whole. And so when I look at the red pill community, I'm like, for so long, people have been describing the elephant the way they wish it were, not acknowledging that it has a nature. And so you and I'm older than you, so for me, I've really seen this happen. But when I came up, it was just men are from Mars, women are from Venus. These are the differences. We just know it to be true. And then we moved into a blank slate period. Mm-hmm. And people started saying, no, men and women, they're basically the same. There's no differences. It's sexist to say that there are differences. This is crazy. That was crazy making. That was lying, not lying because I want to believe that people actually believed it. But nonetheless, it was violently untrue. And when the red pill community came along and started saying, no, big trunk, huge ears, thick skin, these things are all real, people were like, yes, Jesus, that is real. Women do like height. Women do care about wealth. And they do. And so the question becomes then, why are you so right about charisma? Because you are right about charisma. Now, I think you're on the right path with it's somebody who's being aggressively themselves. And I think what that signal is, when somebody can be themselves, it's because they've seen all the attack vectors. I'm going to put it in heady language, but I think this is real. The reason you have an intuitive response to somebody that is themselves, it's the same reason that when a dog rolls over on its back, you know that it feels safe, right? So my dog will sleep on her back. Like that, just from an evolutionary perspective, is a sign of I feel so comfortable and so safe. Now, when you see somebody do that in an environment that they don't control, you assume, oh, they've seen all the attack vectors and they feel up to the challenge. Now, when a man can do that, and this is why when red pill guys say you have to be able to hold frame, yeah, that's true. But you're not holding frame to create a false reality and you never let the woman see who you really are and you're getting her to submit to the frame. I mean, just like they're right about the trunk and the big ears, but like there's a whole that they're missing, a totality, a WHOLE that they are missing. And that's where I think it breaks down. But when you see somebody who is presenting themselves in a way where I have assessed the attack vectors and I can rise to this challenge, therefore I am just going to be who I am because I can take what comes, you're now, that person is, I'll use maybe a loaded word, that person is of higher value than other people in this room, okay? Just by, I've seen this, for people that have seen Michael Strahan on TV, let me tell you, in person, he's not a little bit more charismatic than other people I've met in my life. He he almost isn't human. Like this guy is the most likable person I've ever met in my life. And you have this intense sense, shine that light on me. I want you to shine that light on me. There's something about when somebody has shown, I'm going to be myself. I've looked at the attack vectors. I can rise to this challenge. I have that much confidence. And then there's sexual chemistry because they're who you are attracted to, whether it's guy, girl, male, female, doesn't matter. When there's that added layer of that sexual tension and then they aim that light at you, oof, now you've got something. And that's what I learned. I learned that rolling up with the flowers and the poetry, I was shining a light that they walked into. And that is very different than becoming somebody who people are interested in. You turn it on, you start being yourself. And then when you can establish that you have something interesting to say, that there's more what you call the dynamic pairings, that
unique pairings,
unique pairings. You've got that level of complexity, that level of interest. And now I'm interested in you. And that, if I'm right, and boy, do I think I am, if I'm right that A Billion Wicked Thoughts has really nailed this, and that women, it's the classic Beauty and the Beast myth. Women want to tame the vampire. Women want to tame the billionaire. They want to tame that powerful guy with their sexuality. I mean, just to simplify it.
Yes, but doesn't that kind of assume every woman is at the exact same stage of evolution on their own journey? That no one has gone, like, for example, there are people that get to a point where charisma for them is less interesting because for them, it's just been a marker of vanity. It's been a marker of people trying to constantly be the center of attention, be the person who wants to walk into a room and hold everybody with their stories. And they've dated people like that. And they're like, they've almost come out the other side of it where they've gone, actually, more than anything, I'm starting to see this as a sign of insecurity, not a sign of a strong man or an interesting man or a deep man. It's just, this is just another way that people walk into my life and, shine brightly, and there's not much to it. And so they actually start to look for much more nuanced, much more subtle things that someone might have that don't present themselves as the kind of stereotypically charismatic person that we think about when we think about that. I feel like the same way with guys in general. Like some of the guys that I thought when I first met them, I was like, me and this guy are going to be best friends. Like there's something about this guy. And then 3 months later, I'm like, oh, that's another example of a guy who presents really well in the beginning, is very good at getting people to like him, is very good at shining a light on you for that first hour, but there's not a lot there, or there's no real qualities to this person that make them a great friend or someone I want in my life. And having had that experience enough times, I don't value that experience in the same way anymore. I really don't. Like some of my best friends are people that weren't the most dazzling when I first met them. They're people that I got to know and I was like, this is an amazing guy. And and the understated part of him actually ends up being one of the big things that I'm like, this is the thing I really appreciate in this person. So I worry about how reductive it can be, because it assumes that everyone is at the same level of finding the same things interesting, and that no one has any kind of learning curve with those things where they come out the other side and go, actually, there's a much more nuanced set of things that I'm looking for than the vampire.
According to Trueflation.com, the dollar buys roughly 28% less than it did just 4 years ago. And that means you are going to need a strategy for how to wisely invest your money that allows you to beat inflation. While my single biggest position is by far in crypto, I also have a percentage of my portfolio in gold. If you're interested in learning more about gold, I recommend you contact American Hartford Gold. Tell them I sent you, and you can get up to $15,000 of free silver on your first qualifying order. Click the link in the description or call 866-934-4005 or text IMPACT to 65532. Again, that's 866-934-4005 or just text IMPACT to 65532 or click the link in the description. Please remember, there is always risk involved in investing, and there is no guarantee of any kind.
So, yes,
Which is not me
nuance.
saying tons of people aren't attracted to the charismatic vampire.
I love that. So yeah, I think that you have to understand people at the averages. So I think it is a very shrewd PhD level approach to tell guys, look, at the end of the day, and this is why I say you're trying to become somebody who is actually got unique pairings, not that they're faking it, or because I don't even think that charisma has to be loud.
Agreed.
But I think if you understand things at the averages, then you can figure out, like, are you on the tail somewhere or whatever. But in the age of, we are in a toxic soup right now. So I have a growing level of concern about where the culture is headed. Now, I think that you're going to see people over the next 2 to 3 years, I think you're going to see a real push for, and this first made my radar because of what Jordan Peterson is doing. You're going to see a real push to return to religion. You're going to see a real push to women embrace motherhood, celebrating being a mother, celebrating staying at home, to reopen that option as a valid life choice, because we just moved through a decade or two of that's not cool. And so I think that you are going to see people really pushing those traditional values. And I have a feeling that history is just this pendulum swinging back and forth. I can't remember if you and I have talked about this before, but I've always been mortified that when I was like 14 and I read about Roman orgies, I was like, wait, that was 2,000 years ago. There's no orgies happening now. So I was deeply traumatized that I had missed the good times. Yeah. So only, of course, now to see, oh, okay, this is just a pendulum that swings back and forth. Okay.
On a cosmic level, you only just missed it.
Yeah, right. Oh, it's only 2,000 years. So going back to the idea of charisma can be quiet, but you really do have to become the kind of person that is interesting. You really do have to understand that if women are drawn to height, what are you going to do to compensate? Because you're behind the 8 ball. If women are drawn to men with access to resources, what is that? Is that the finger or the moon? So there's I think it's either Taoist or Buddhist, where they say don't confuse the finger for the moon. So when someone's trying to point to a thing, know the difference between the thing pointing and the thing that they're pointing at. Now, I have a feeling that wealth isn't quite the thing that they're looking for. They're looking for potential. They're looking for competence, because on an evolutionary time frame, having a deer or whatever the thing is, because just the absolutely staggering majority of human history, we didn't even have agriculture. So there was no way to stack wealth like that. So wealth is simply a modern cue to, oh, this person knows how to get resources in the future when I will need them. And yeah, I'll stop there.
My concern with so much of this is, firstly, like certain things I hear along the way, like there'll be a return to, maybe you would say a more conservative state, or at least a more traditional state, religion, embracing being a mother, embracing staying at home, and so on. I don't know that why is someone stepping away from embracing being a mother or embracing staying at home? Like what led to that? I'm not steeped in the history of that, but
I'll give you 2 words.
okay.
The pill.
Right. So controlling the birth cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which meant what?
I now get to choose. I don't have to, because when you are pregnant, giving birth, and you have to nurse, and none of the technologies for breast pumping and all that exist, you have to stay at home and take care of the kid.
Right.
From what I hear, and I don't have kids, so I can't vouch for this personally, that breastfeeding is, if not a full-time job, it is a hyper robust part-time job.
Right. So this is, sometimes I get lost in so much of the rhetoric around these things because I feel like they always seem to point to the differences between men and women. And I feel like so much of the time it ends up just showing men and women being very, very similar, if not the same in so many ways. You know, for a man or a woman, having an exciting career is exciting, right? It's fun. The idea of being able to go out and do that and have more control over that part of my life, on the surface at least, just feels like a really important and good thing because I now get to do something that brings me intense fulfillment and joy in the same way that men have been able to enjoy for so long. As a woman, someone now gets to go and enjoy that and make the most of that. And I think it's still, for me, it feels like it's such a challenge and in some ways such a sad state of affairs that a woman can be in a peak moment of her career where things would just keep going. And then if she also decides at that same time, but I'm running out of time to have a biological child of my own, that in some way is going to slow me down to a greater or lesser extent, depending on the person and the way they decide to parent or what resources they have, that is going to slow them down. And that for me feels like it's a biological thing. And it's we're not, you know, it might also, it's a cultural thing maybe of us not putting the right resources around a woman in that situation. But I look at that and I go, what's the real difference there between men and women? Like, they want the same things. I often think about the same, you know, I'm going to ramble for a bit because I just feel like there's different things here that whenever I hear all of it, especially from the communities that talk about these things, I always feel like there's this sort of strange fetishization of the differences between men and women. You know, it's like, okay, women and height, right? But what is the difference? Like, are we mad that women are as superficial as men are? Like that.
Why is that superficial?
Well, whether you call it superficial or not, well, because I suppose height doesn't necessarily determine someone's value in a marriage. Like if a woman wants a taller guy, we can say it's superficial to the extent that it's a physical quality, it has no bearing on his personality, and it's not going to change his value in the marriage. There seems to me a lot of anger around things like that, but a lot of hypocrisy too. Because the same people that complain that women only want this are also guys who say, but I only want this. And it's therefore not a blanket kind of, I just want any woman and I don't care, I'm not superficial. It's a kind of, I feel like I want a certain kind of woman and I'm frustrated or mad that that kind of woman doesn't want me, which to me is the kind of superficiality that they are accusing the other side of. And that's where it loses me a bit, because it feels like there is this inherent kind of entitlement and hypocrisy to it, where I don't want to change my standards for what I want, but I want someone else to change their standards for what they want. And then we can get into the whole sex thing, but again, there's a kind of, it feels like there's then an anger of women are as sexual as guys are. And I don't like that. It feels like there's something inherently threatening to a lot of guys about the idea that, God forbid a woman be as sexual as a man is. God forbid she go and have her fun. Like I want to go and have my fun, but I don't want her to go and have her fun. I want to have been able to do all of these things, but I don't want her to have been able to do all of these things. And I don't know on what basis we're saying how do I say it? I sometimes feel like the people saying these things haven't spent enough time around women. Like they haven't spent enough time being friends with women, truly connecting with women, truly being close to women, and spending long enough with them to realize that this is kind of you in another body. This is not like, there is not this thing of it's me and it's them and they're so different. The more I know women, the more I kind of feel like, God, we've been sold on just how different they are. And I'm not coming from a place of saying there's zero differences between men and women. That's not I don't have some kind of entrenched stance on that. So before anyone says I'm someone who claims there are no differences between men and women, I honestly don't have a dog in that fight. But I do kind of look at, especially like content on YouTube these days, I look at what feels to me like this endless obsession with the differences between men and women. And I go, the more women are given the chance to do things that men do or enjoy the things that men enjoy or whatever, the more I see them being similar in a hell of a lot of ways, more ways than we try to claim they're different. And I think there are differences. I watch the differences a lot of the time. I don't think, the experience for me, when I look at it empirically, often isn't the same. Not always, but often isn't the same for a woman who sleeps with a guy on a first date versus a guy who sleeps with a woman on a first date. Like if I imagine if I took a sample of 100 people, how many women after that first date, having slept with the person, if they never heard from them again, would feel in some way some regret or feel used, it would be higher than the number of men who would say the same. But I do somehow think that these things get overhyped. The money argument, I think, gets overhyped. I think there is a kind of obsession with, if I was a guy with more money, then I would do better with women. And I think that ends up, it becomes another kind of, it's everything goes to the guys with money. And I think that gets taken to such an extreme that it ends up being completely divorced from the reality of how many women actually care about whether a guy has money or not. Like we live in LA, so there's definitely a decent number of people here that care if someone has money and status and so on, and that might have been part of what attracted to them to this place. But God, the number of relationships I see, again, empirically, the number of relationships I see around me where money has not played any kind of a part in why someone was attracted to that person. It couldn't have, because that person wasn't coming from a place of money or had less than that person. So this is a long and rambling way of saying I worry about the rabbit holes that we go down in this area. And I think we can always find evidence for them. But a doctor friend of mine said to me, statistics don't matter to the individual. When it comes to illnesses, if you're the person who has an illness, it doesn't matter if that illness is 1 in 10,000. You have that illness. Statistic doesn't matter to the individual. But I think in a positive way that can be applied to your love life. If you want to find love, the statistics or the kind of ideas and stories people have about what, everyone's attracted to and what they're doing, if you have fundamental things in place, like your own confidence, like an acceptance of yourself and who you are, like a sense of purpose about what you enjoy and what you want to do in life, you are going to find someone who appreciates you for what you are, for who you are, for what you're doing. That you don't fit into some kind of a mold that would win the popularity contest in the mating game, I don't think is the most important thing to you. To me, that's like complaining about the macro of what men and women seem to be attracted to. It, to me, is like complaining about the government when you're starting a flower shop. You don't need the government on your side to have a successful flower shop. You need to do what you do really well on your street. And that's the part where so much of it loses me, I suppose.
Okay, a lot of threads. So thread number one, I agree with you very much that the analogy of worrying about what all women are like, what they want, whatever, when you're trying to just find one person is irrelevant, and you need to figure out, how do I become the kind of person that people would be attracted to? I am, though, one of the fetishists around the difference between men and women. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I agree with you that there are a lot of rabbit holes, and that I think people are twisting their ankles in a lot of these holes, and they're just making a mess of things. All I'm saying to people is try to identify the way the world is. Now, once you know the way the world is, like if I were 5'4", I'd be like, okay, word. Women care about height. Can I give you a stat? This is insane to me. So they created computer-generated images of men, nude. They showed them to women, and they said, rate them on attractiveness. Mm-hmm. So the guys were varying heights with varying sizes of penis. Now, if you want to make the woman uptick him in attractiveness, do you think you make him taller or give him a bigger penis?
Taller.
For sure. By a country mile. So if you make him like an inch taller, it was like, it goes up, I forget the percentage, goes up 10%, let's say, for every inch. And if you have a guy that's over 6 foot, you have to, so I don't remember the height of the guy they compared it to, but let's say 5'6". Mm-hmm. If you take a guy that's 5'6" and you compare to a guy that's 6 foot or taller, you have to double the size of his penis to get the same increase in attractiveness that a single inch in height gets you.
Okay.
PSA, if you want to be in a thriving relationship, remember all that matters is how you make that woman feel about herself when she's with you. If you make her feel seen, safe, beautiful, heard, your money. Some people are going to be slow burns, which is what you were describing earlier, that quiet charisma that takes time, but that's harder, right? Because, hey, if they can see it right away, that's way better. Anyway, if you become the kind of man that makes her feel the way she wants to feel when she is with you, amazing. I'm just saying that does break down into a fairly, on average, knowable set of things. Now, there are the averages, and then there are the specifics. And there's a great quote, and I really must look this up because every time I have to go in this preamble, if I don't remember who said it, it was originally said about men. On average, any individual man is a total mystery. On average, they are a mathematical certainty. Same is true of women. Individually, who knows what she's going to be attracted to. Some women, I'm sure, are super into short guys. But on average, they're a mathematical certainty. What I want to see people do is stop fighting against just that humans have a nature, figure out what that is, and play the game to win.
When you look at the red pill community, do you feel like it is ultimately just fighting against and therefore a recipe for unhappiness?
No, I don't. So the bad news about the red pill community is, in a sea of people saying there's no difference, they're the only ones pointing out that the emperor has no clothes. My problem is that they never say the point of a marriage is to tackle this gruelingly difficult life with a partner.
What do they say instead?
That you need to be a high value man that can get any woman you want. Don't settle for one woman. Sleep with at least 50 women before you settle down. If you can keep your options open to sleep with other women, you should. Women should submit to you. You need to create a frame, invite her in. That gets you 80% of the message.
What? Maybe this is off track from where you want to go, but I'm just so fascinated by how do they square the complete inequality of all of that? Like by what right are they saying that they should have so much more than women, whether it's in terms of power, whether it's in terms of dominance, whether it's in terms of sexual partners, whether the dynamic of the relationship? Like what's the reasoning? Because it's one thing to point out that women en masse like taller guys, but where does the jump happen? Because, by the way, you could make an argument that men en masse like women with a certain body shape.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and you would be right.
that doesn't make women worse than men, right? It just is the female equivalent
We haven't addressed that yet.
of the male thing. Like, I don't know what there's superficiality on both sides is all that tells me.
It's interesting. I don't read that as superficial.
Okay,
and
you
the
read
last
it.
time
You
I
read it
forgot
as
to-
a
It's just a biological
biological
driver.
indicator of it can be protected by this.
Symmetry means you don't have parasites.
Fine, but that's that we accuse that of being the reason men get angry with that is because it feels superficial. Whether you argue from an anthropological standpoint or an evolutionary biology standpoint that that's because of I could be protected by this person better, on a human level, what bothers me about that is I'm a good guy and it doesn't get any credit because you'd rather go for that guy who's a worse guy but he's taller, right? That's what bothers us.
Yeah.
So, and there's the female equivalent of that, which is you don't care that I'm a good woman. You just want me to be a certain weight or have boobs of a certain size or have a certain kind of ass. Like the idea that, like the demonization of women in that respect is the part that bothers me because I go, what's the difference? This happens on both sides. Why people on that side are so hurt by what they, wherever it comes from, what they perceive to be a devaluing of who they really are in favor of something that appears superficial, is men can be accused of just as much. So where's the leap to, and therefore we should be able to dominate women and we should be able to tell women what to do and we should be able to dictate what's okay for a woman to do and what's not okay for a woman to do, and that they should have less sexual partners than us and that they should have less freedom in the marriage than us? And what's that?
Okay. So the first thing I will address is the reason that people respond with anger and frustration to the what you're calling superficial elements with no acceptance of I'm doing exactly the same thing is something called the psychological immune system. So the psychological immune system's job is to keep you from committing suicide. So if you are rejected because you are short and there's nothing you can do about it, and that feels like a terminal thing, and now I have no value because this woman that I want rejected me because I'm short, psychological immune system is going to kick in and say, fuck her. She's shallow. And instead of, which I would say is the healthy response, okay, word, I have a deficit, understood. I'm going to find my other points of leverage. And the world is not a fair place. And so a lot of this stuff, like if you want to lament anything, lament intelligence. It is ungodly that there are people that have an 80 IQ. Bro, they can't stuff envelopes. I mean that literally. The U.S. military will not accept somebody with below 84 IQ, I think is the cutoff. That means you can't even get shot well. Like you are a bigger distraction. I can't even like put you in front of bullets because you will create more problems. That terrifies me. There, but for the grace of God go I. Mm-hmm. I did not do anything to earn whatever intellect I have. Bro, That sucks, but it is. And so now the question becomes, all right, you've got people responding poorly to this situation. Some are getting resentful and bitter. Others are like when a true tyrannical patriarchy takes over and we have a problem and women are legitimately not given the same rights and they are tucked in a corner and they're instructed to do as they're told. That's horrendous, horrendous. People need only look at the woman I'm married to, because I can tell if people are clipping me out, they're going to think I'm something that I'm not. I am married to a badass entrepreneur who stands on her own 2 feet, makes her own money, is a fucking badass. However, if she did not, without faking it, look at me like I'm powerful, we couldn't be together, because I have an evolutionary algorithm in my brain that makes me respond like a drug when my wife looks at me like, oh my God, like you're so powerful, you're amazing, I love that. I want that, I need that, I'm going to seek that, I'm going to find that. And if thankfully I get that from my wife, we are equals, let me assure you, but we are different. And so I look at her with just amazement at the things that she's good at that I'm not. And thankfully, she looks at me in amazement at the things that I'm good at that she's not. And thankfully, both of those line up with the evolutionary algorithms that are running in our brains, where we want to be rewarded for those specific things. So the red pill community, you were saying, what gives them the right? Okay, depending on where you're at on the spectrum, like there are really goofy ass people in the red pill community that are currently stunted in their development, and I will be very excited to see them mature. Then there are people that have matured quite a bit, but I'd still put them in the red pill community. The people at the low end, they're in the grips of the psychological immune system. They feel rejected, they feel less than, and they need to lash out. They don't understand they're doing it. It's pure emotion. They are angry, and that anger feels like truth. The red pill gives them the words to say, oh, this is why she's a bitch. So it's not an abstract concept. I can actually tell you, she's hypergamous. She just fucking wants money. She dates over and up, and I'm too short, and it's all superficial, and she just wants to be taken care of and to monetize her ass, and right? That's going to be, they're stuck. They are not seeing the world the way that it really is. But they have words now for the psychological immune system to leverage to explain why they're right and she's shallow for rejecting them. But as you get up higher, you're going to start hearing people say things like, this is a woman's nature. She will be happier having kids. She'll be happier raising those children and tending to the home. And she is my equal. And we're just different, right? Now, you will hear me say some of those words, which is why I'm like, there's enough real in the red pill community. It's not just going to go away.
But when I hear she will be happier,
Yep.
I can't help but hear this just rampant patronization embedded in that you can't take what she says at face value that she wants. You need a man to tell her what she wants, because she really doesn't understand what she wants. She's running around doing all of her things that she's doing, but she doesn't understand that what she really wants is this thing that I as a man know she wants. I can't imagine the other way around, being like men feeling that was in any way tolerable, that a woman was saying, you're too dumb to know what you want, essentially, or you're too, let's say, not self-aware or not aware of your nature to know what you really want.
How about too toxic? Because we hear that a lot.
That men are too toxic.
Yeah.
Fine, but there's plenty of that. Like, I can't argue that there's not plenty of toxicity in the male. Like, exhibit A, everything we've been talking about in this interview that comes from the extreme of that, which I can't help but, I mean, look, I'm not deep in what the world of, I'm not deep in, I'm not highly, highly aware of red pill. I learned much of my red pill stuff from how much you know about it. But I'm definitely also not deep in whatever the female equivalent of that is. But I would be shocked. I'm sure there's plenty of hatred towards men in those communities, but I would be shocked if it took the same form as it seems to be taking on the male side. The same level of aggression, the same level of...
No, because men and women are different.
Okay.
So women's savage reputations, #MeToo, social media in general, tyrannical authoritarianism is in this. This was where I started the conversation with Jordan Peterson, was like, this feels like when female aggression becomes pathological, it manifests as you can't do that. There are things that must not be said. There are things that are just too beyond the pale to even discuss.
But you don't think that comes from men too? Because I feel like there's so many men who do that.
When male aggression goes pathological, it's the Mongols. It's kill, rape, pillage. It's horrendous, horrific. When men go wrong, they go fucking wrong. And I feel it very prudent of me to plant a flag right now and say that I'm as mortified as you are when guys are like, oh, she doesn't know well enough. Bro, the last thing I'm going to do is tell my wife, no. Bless you, sweetie. You're not able to think through this problem. This is what you need to do. My wife helps me think through problems. We are a pair. Mm-hmm. So I want her insights. I want her intelligence. That's where this all breaks, is they're not looking for a partner. They are, and look, now we're into my bias. When the red pill community at the high end, where they have a lot of good points, I think, and this is where it would be very useful to have somebody that truly believes this to speak, but I have a feeling what they would say is, you need a brotherhood, like fellow soldiers building businesses together, or legitimately, I mean, there's 2 wars going on right now. So that brotherhood fills that. And that from a historical perspective, it is almost certainly true that marriages were economic and family in nature. They were not about love and like, this is my best friend and you're getting everything that you ever need from one person. So they would say, what my wife and I do together is build a family, and we divide and conquer, and we are equals. I'm the leader in the house. And so, yes, I make decisions. And women, I don't know if you argue this, but literature seems pretty clear. Women are hypergamous. They want to date across and up. So they are perfectly happy to date somebody more intelligent than they are. Men are not. And if you look at the stats, when a woman out-earns a man, dude, divorce rates go up, domestic violence goes up, the use of erectile dysfunction medication goes up. I think men are pretty simple. If they don't feel powerful, you are in trouble. So anyway, so that's where I think they break down. Now, I don't know. I have long had a hypothesis about why I am so good at long-term pair bonding. I have a feeling, I've never gotten myself tested, but I have a feeling that I have just an unbelievable amount of receptors for oxytocin and vasopressin. So when I bond with my wife, dude, that shit is my everything. That is my everything. I would kill, slaughter, maim for my wife, which is a very masculine way of saying that I love my wife.
It definitely is.
Yeah. So yes, I think they miss something. They miss a very critical piece, but they are giving voice to something that I think men feel intuitively, even if they aren't able to put words to it, which is everything I'm being told does not feel right. And that feel right to me is a discrepancy between the algorithms that they have running and the evolutionary algorithms and what they're being told. Don't be aggressive. Don't be hyper ambitious. Don't be physical. Sit down, pay attention. And we're creating a world where it's something like by the year 2035, I'm making that up, but this is what I'm about to say is directionally correct, though not literally. By the year something like 2035, 50% of everybody in America will grow up without a father in the house.
Whoa.
Yeah, terrifying. So it's one of those where you now have a just female-led society. That's a bit of an overstatement. That doesn't feel right, which is why I say that in a weird way. But there's a tension there that is just as an overly masculinized society can tend towards pathology, so can I won't even say that. I will say you need both. And when you don't have both, you have some level of muted characteristics.
I've been seeing a lot more literature coming out recently around. There's a book called Get Married by, I think, Brian Wilcox. I might have that wrong. I've seen like a growing amount of people espousing, to your point, the values of marriage and how important it is. And so much of it seems to center around that idea of it's not great for people to be raised by single parents, and people need to get married, and people need to be in the traditional family unit. And I don't know where I'm going with this point, but I am, when you say by a certain point, 50% of America is going to be, you said, raised by a single parent?
Raised
without
a
father
in the house, yeah.
Your home is where you should feel the safest. Stay protected, connected, and in control 24/7 with the #1 customer-rated DIY home security system from Cove. Cove was named Best Home Security System in 2023 by US News and World Report and is less than half the cost of most traditional home security systems. The average install takes less than 30 minutes, so you're up and running quickly and easily. Cove's intuitive alarm panel keeps you connected to their 6 monitoring stations at all times, so you'll get the help you need right away. And with their rapid SOS alarm response system, Cove will confirm your emergency and send help in as little as 30 seconds. Save 70% and get a free HD camera when you sign up at covesmart.com/impact. That's covesmart.com/impact to save 70% and get a free HD camera.
I've had this discomfort looking at the amount of stuff that's content currently being generated about why people should get married that seems to be in some way aimed at women, that is missing the point entirely of what is really happening. Because the majority of my audience, I mean, increasingly, actually, we have a huge community of men too, which I love. But the majority is still women, and they really, really want to find love. They really want to meet someone. The problem out there isn't that people are rejecting relationships, not as far as I can see. It's that they really want one, and they are struggling out there to find a relationship, to find someone that they either feel is right for them, or in some cases to be visible at all. They feel like they are totally invisible out there in the dating world. And that, to me, is, that's always, I have this weird position of having grown up as a guy. I relate to so many of the things that people say when they're hurt as men. I've been in the situation of being utterly steamrolled in a relationship and being that person that was like came out of it feeling like, what on earth was I thinking? Like, I got walked all over there. I have 2 brothers. I understand the kinds of insecurities that guys have, but I've also spent so much time around women that I see how hard I have this front row seat to how hard it is out there for women, and to the kinds of things that they come up against, and to how lovely and kind and wonderful so many of these people are. And it is so unbelievably at odds with the rhetoric that I see coming from those communities of guys that, and you know, again, differently, as we've already said, there's a warped rhetoric coming from communities of women too, that I think fundamentally misunderstands guys. And I think fetishizes the otherness of guys as well. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in female communities of how sensitive guys really are. And I think to that idea of like why are men so angry, I also think that anger is a very, very, it's a very seductive shield for a lot of guys against being seen for just how fragile they are, for just how vulnerable they are and how sensitive they are. I know it because I've had, you know, my own versions of it in my life. I know that before I was who I am today, and when I would get jealous of something, my go-to wasn't let me be vulnerable about the fact that I'm jealous. My go-to was passive aggression, going cold, going on the attack, creating an argument, distancing myself from someone altogether. And all of that was just insecurity. All of that was just me being afraid that I didn't match up, afraid that I wasn't good enough, afraid that I didn't compare to that guy over there, afraid that I was going to get left, afraid that I was going to get my heart broken. But that didn't manifest as vulnerability from me as a guy. It just manifested as either anger or being controlling, or honestly just not being a nice person, like being, whether someone would call it toxic masculinity. I don't think it was that far on the spectrum, but you can see it's all a spectrum. Had I gone further and further and further, it would have easily become some version of that. Because I think so much of that anger is, I think so many of these men are deeply, deeply hurt. And I think that there's a sensitivity there and an insecurity there that anger is a shield for. And all of that is to say, working with the number of women I've worked with over my life, I have so much compassion for what women go through and what they've experienced, and how so many of these women are exactly the same as the guys. So many are like...
What do you mean by that?
They really want to find love, and they feel invisible. They feel completely overlooked. They feel like they do not fit the mold, and that life has just been nothing but disappointments for them. And that, for me, is no different than the level of disappointment that is experienced on the other side. But my thing with all of this is I absolutely take your point about when you realize that you don't meet the height requirement for mass attraction. I don't want to be rose-tinted glasses about that. I just, for me, everything goes to acceptance. Everything always goes to acceptance. It always goes to, okay, what can I control? And for sure, everyone can control enough variables that they can be attractive to someone, and that they can have an incredible relationship. And by the way, if you're annoyed, even at that point, that you can't be the person that everyone in the room has animalistic attraction for on the level that Brad Pitt does when he walks into a room, well, you also weren't born in some impoverished street in Africa where you had to worry about your next meal. So you won a lottery, right? Maybe you didn't win the height lottery, but you won a lottery. And we're really good at focusing on the lotteries we didn't win and getting frustrated or angry about those. But to me, it feels like this enormous dismissal of how good we have it, or how many things we do have going for us, or how many ways we lucked out in life, which is, to me, goes back to the entitlement of, I feel entitled to a better life, an easier life than the one I have. But it's by who says? Who says? Life sucks for so many ways for so many people. You could have died when you were 2. Like, it's our job is simple. It's just make the most of what you have. And you can have a really, really great life if you decide to do that. or not, by the way, or your life is so bad that you happen to be on a street that a terrorist organization is mowing down next week, and you don't have the chance to make your life great despite trying to control all the variables. But again, if you're still commenting in the community, you're not that person. So it's, my thing is, and the reason I like having conversations like this, because this is not my wheelhouse. Like, having these conversations this isn't something I engage with a lot, because I'm spending all of my time with people trying to just compassionately work with them to help them be happier, more peaceful, whatever that means for them. And I work with a lot of women, but I absolutely love, anytime, Audrey will tell you, when a guy comes up to me on the street and says, "You really helped me," I get really, really like, for me, I'm much more giddy when the guy comes over, because I'm just excited to see that a guy follows and he enjoys the work. And that for me is like a big moment, because I love men. I love men. But when I do engage with conversations like this, which I feel complete amateur in, my only goal is how do we get more people, like how do we actually bring men and women together and have them be more compassionate towards each other on the women's side too? Because to me, that will change the game for people. It won't just change the world in whatever modest way I am able to do it, but it will also change the game for everyone who I'm able to do that. I had a guy say on a recent video I did, I'm a recovering red pill, community member, or whatever he said. But I was like, that meant a lot to me, because I was like, oh, if you're on the like fence, or if you're even leaning towards the fence, or even curious, listening over, I would like to be that person that could invite people to another way of thinking about this, because I do believe life is inherently unfair. I really do. Like, how many men are out there getting hair transplants because they just feel like the moment they get it, they'll be more visible to the opposite sex or to the same sex. Like, we know this. It breaks my heart how much vulnerability there is in the world, how many different ways we can feel fragile and not enough and vulnerable. But I do believe if we get out of this idea of, if you're trying to play the game of how many people can I attract in life, or how can I attract en masse, or can I be the most popular person, then you're in trouble in certain situations if you don't have certain markers. But if your game that you're playing is, I want to find an awesome human being to share my life with, I really believe that so much of what these people are talking about does not have to be something that is even on your radar. It doesn't have to be something that impacts your life. You can go your whole life without knowing any of those theories, and you will be fine so long as you have certain things, which goes back to what you said. There are certain things that make the difference. What are those things? What can I be? But the losing yourself in the arguments, I think, is the enemy of actually finding a relationship. The same way I think that women losing themselves in the bitterness that they have towards men in general is the enemy of finding an amazing relationship with a man.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I want to go back to something that you said that I didn't quite understand. There's something that distresses you about the messages aimed at women around the importance of getting married.
Oh, yeah.
What is it about, though? Is it that you think that that's being too prescriptive about the thing that will make them happy?
No, I think that it's like saying to someone who hasn't got money right now, your life would be a lot easier if you just had $5 million. Okay. Like, if you can deposit it in my account, that would be great. But it's like not solving the actual problem.
What do you see? What is the actual problem?
That's a great question. I think that there's challenges on both sides, but it's
Both sides meaning men and women.
men and women. People aren't being proactive enough in their love lives. When they are proactive, they are often entertaining the wrong things instead of identifying what the right things are and then moving aggressively towards them and saying no to things that don't fit that.
Can you give us some examples of what the right things are?
Someone's not texting me back, and that feels more interesting than the person who is. That someone is hot and cold, but we had an amazing date last week, and I'm going to be blinded by how amazing that date was, instead of paying attention to the fact that since that date, they've been wildly inconsistent with their communication and are showing no promise. It's the chasing the wrong things, is taking these things that make someone a bad bet, a bad partner, a bad communicator, someone who's not ready, and then continuing to get locked into those things instead of identifying what are the things that are actually going to make me happy, even if they're uncomfortable for a while, because a lot of people find it hard to, like, when we start going for something healthier, it feels unnatural to a lot of us. It feels, even for me, going from dating to a healthy relationship, at the time as a single man, there was an addictive quality to the way that I dated. It was spikes. And I had to get to a point in my life where I said, this isn't making me happy. This is like leaving me feeling strange and anxious and disconnected, and the hangovers seem to be worse. It just doesn't, in the emotional hangovers, this just doesn't make me feel good anymore. But when you realize something doesn't feel good, it doesn't mean that you're programmed to want the right thing yet. It just means it doesn't feel good anymore. And there's a transition period. There's a chapter in the book called How to Rewire Your Brain, which is really about how do you get yourself to start to actually train your body and your psychology around something that ultimately is going to make you happier, but in the short term may feel alien to you because of the way you've set up your life or what you're going for. And I'm now in the healthiest, most peaceful, most beautiful relationship I've ever been in. That has no shortage of passion, but it's calm, and there's a very different feeling to it. And there's no volatility. It's not chaotic. It's a different kind of sensation. And I think sometimes, we've often from childhood, we've been programmed to chase sensations that are not going to make us happy. They are going to make us miserable, but we chase them because they're what we know, what has been imprinted. And so I think that there's a big task for a lot of people. They will keep chasing those things that make them unhappy so long as that old wiring is still in place.
Talk to me about the wiring. What is it that makes people chase the wrong thing? We're raised, you said, to chase the wrong thing.
I think that if we're brought up in a way where, let's just take one, we're made to earn love in the way that we have to show up, in the way that we have to make everyone happy. Like maybe we were the peacemaker in our family and we got love for being the peacemaker and for always being there for everyone and for always going out of our way. And, we carry that into the rest of our life. It doesn't make us someone who's good at meeting our own needs. We find ourselves getting into relationships where we're constantly trying to meet somebody else's needs. And anytime we even worry about our needs, we feel unsafe. We feel like this doesn't make me, like me focusing on what I want makes me feel like it makes me feel uneasy. And maybe I don't even know why, but it makes me feel anxious to make it about me. So I'm just going to make it about you. But I'm going to spend years in a relationship where I'm deeply resentful of you because you never think of me. But I never ask you to think of me, right? Because it's just not in my programming to do that. There's other people that love is, being abandoned for days on end or for weeks on end. And then all of a sudden, someone gives me a gift. And I breathe because I'm like, oh my God, they're thinking of me. If that was your pattern growing up, then you go into adulthood and someone doesn't text you for a week and it makes you feel like you're going to die, which is completely irrational, but you can't breathe, you can't eat, you can't sleep. You're just like, I feel sick. Why won't this person message me? And then Friday night comes around and they say, what's up? And you're like, oh my God, they've been thinking of me. They do like me. And it feels like the greatest feeling in the world. And it feels like confirmation that this is something really special. It must be something really special. This person must be really important because it feels this good. But that has nothing to do with the quality of the relationship. Quite the opposite. It is familiar. It is what we're used to. And so I watch people in their love lives repeat these patterns over and over again because their nervous system is just trained for certain things. If you take a drug addict and on the day they quit and they're going cold turkey, you ask them to sit in front of a sunset and appreciate it, it would be the most boring thing in the world. It cannot compare to the euphoric highs that they have been experiencing. Of course, those highs are followed by the, corresponding crashes and the depression and all of that. But a sunset's not going to move the dial. But at a certain point, when you've stopped experiencing those sensations for long enough, you might actually learn to appreciate something that is, by the way, spectacular. There is something awe-inspiring about it. There is something that makes us feel deeply grateful or deeply connected. There is something about nature that is just transcendent. But if you've been experiencing like free highs, you are not going to appreciate nature 2 days later. And I think that great relationships, the things that I appreciate the most about my relationship today with my wife, they are things that I don't think I could have been present for 5 or 10 years ago. They're things that I've, by in a sense, retraining my nervous system, have allowed me to now have a level of gratitude that is beyond anything I've ever experienced.
How do you prime your mind for that? So I think that people build their frame of reference, which is like a set of beer goggles through which you view your own life. Mm-hmm. You shape it by your beliefs, your values, and your biology, but we'll leave that aside for now. So what beliefs, what values did you begin to adjust in your own mind in order to prime yourself to get out of the sort of drug-like addiction to your dating cycle?
First, I had never felt truly seen and accepted before, the way that Audrey saw and accepted me.
Now, was that just luck that you found somebody?
I think it was a bit of me realizing like it was me being on a path I'd been humbled a lot in like the last 10 years of my life, and things had gone wrong and I experienced health issues and a lot of that, like, I got to a point where, maybe if you'd met me at 25, there was a much more like invincible version of me that just felt like I was bulletproof and I knew it all. And, and then I got punched in the face a few times. I got my heart broken. That was a big one. Never had my heart broken that badly before. I experienced 7 years of crippling chronic pain, that physical pain that took me out of my life. I mean, I was a zombie in my own life for a very long time, a very highly functioning zombie, but like truly went to a therapist, said to him, I'm not Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just gonna, I literally said to him, I've made a decision that I'm gonna live for other people from now on, because I'm never gonna be happy again for as long as this chronic condition is still here. And I have been trying to make it go away for 5 years, and nothing has moved the needle on it. So I was convinced that my life was over, and truly convinced. Like, okay, I have a team that relies on me. I have a family that relies on me. You know, I have people in my life that I love. So I'm going to be here for them, and I'm going to show up and make their lives as good as I can possibly make them. But my life is over. I was truly convinced of that at one point. And so that's a very humbling experience. And when I met Audrey, I was, you know, on a path of trying to figure out what, you know, where my happiness was coming from, and what, you know, how I could try to connect to my life. So I was searching, I think is the short answer. And then she responded to me differently than I think people had in the past. And by the way, people I'd dated in the past were awesome. They were great. There was nothing wrong with anyone that I dated. They were amazing people. But something about the way that Audrey approached me, and the vulnerability that she kind of invited me to.
Now, are you emo Matt at this point, or are you still charismatic?
No, I'm like like a kind of more subdued charisma. I feel like I was more outwardly charismatic when I was 25 than like, you know, 7 years later, because I was still me, but I had really been humbled. Like, truly, I'd been brought to my knees by this thing. And I didn't feel invincible anymore. And more than that, I was worried. I had thoughts, I had a story that, like, now that I've like got this chronic pain, and it has made me feel so weak, like so fragile. And I don't mean like physically like emotionally fragile, that I thought if anyone knew how emotionally fragile I felt right now, it would be so unattractive. Like, all my deepest insecurities came out, that I'm not going to be enough for someone. I'm not going to be the alpha male that someone might want. I'm not, you know, like, I had all that plagued me. And I was telling Lisa that, like, I remember having a fight with Audrey where this was very early on, I didn't want to show any vulnerability. I didn't want to show why I was upset. I didn't want to show that the real reason behind the fight was that something she had done had made me insecure. I just tried to, like, fight and push her away. And by the way, that was like, I had years before that shared something very vulnerable, like of insecurity with someone. And they looked at me and said, that's really unattractive.
Wow.
Yeah. And it really, like, it truly punched me in the gut. Like, I remember I was living with my friend at the time, and I remember going to my friend and saying to him, I was so angry. I was not even angry with her. I was angry with myself.
For showing it?
Yes. I hated myself for showing it. I was like, you idiot. Like, why would you say that? You knew it was a bad idea. You knew that would make you seem insecure. You knew that would make you unattractive. And you got, like, there it is. And because I already secretly suspected that, oh, this insecurity makes me detestable, or this insecurity makes me ugly or unattractive. When she said that, it was like, for a moment, I was like, I'm never doing that again.
What should men take away from that story? And before you answer that, I will say, my wife once said to me, your insecurities are not sexy. And I was like, God damn. And it was exactly what I needed to hear, because I was looping. She didn't say it the first 10 times, but there was finally one night she was like, you know, it's not sexy, right? And her punchline was, do something about it or stop talking about it. But fuck, looping around it. So here you've got two guys, high functioning, emotionally intelligent, but we both have a story where women were for real. Like, hey, that insecurity isn't attractive.
Yes.
Now what? What's the takeaway?
Well, that's the funny thing, because you and I may have come to different conclusions on that. Because I for a while, I was like, I'm
going to guess we came to the exact same conclusion, but I can't wait to
okay,
hear.
let's see. But it definitely, it made me resentful for a minute, and it made me not like myself. It made me mad. And then,
Did you guys break up over that?
not over that, but we obviously it didn't last, but no, not over that. But I remember having the exact thought of, now that I've said that, this person's fundamentally changed the way they look at me. Like, I remember having that feeling, which was my worst fear, that this insecurity is now going to become the truth of how you see me, instead of all of the wonderful ways I've showed up, all of the manly ways I've showed up, all of the bold, confident, sexy ways I've showed up, that this is now going to be the truth of how you see me. And there's no going back, right? And that, I think I always carried that fear, by the way. You know, that fear didn't start the day that happened. That just was this major validation of a deep fear that I had. And it was almost like I trusted that person with a part of me that they just they couldn't make room for. Cut to Audrey, and what almost could have pushed her away was the antagonistic way I brought up something that I had a grievance with, not the insecurity behind it, not the fear behind it. And when, you know, she approached me and said, look, I want to understand more about like where that comes from, or what's like, what made you feel, I hate, and by the way, here's where she was like, checked me. She was like, you can't bring me stuff like this in this way. Like, this is not okay. But I do want to understand why that hurt you, because I really don't want to hurt you. That's the last thing in the world I want to do. So I want to understand that. So there was a compassion, but there was also a standard there of like, this is not, you can't bring stuff to me in this way. This is not right. But when I actually shared, it's funny, I shared with her that the deepest insecurity, the fear. And then an hour later, I was feeling really, really off. And I was like, she was like, why, what's wrong? Like, I can feel you being cold. I can feel like something's going on. And I then had to articulate my even bigger fear now. That now that I've said this, you are going to view me differently. And I've somehow sabotaged the relationship by saying this thing that you're never going to be able to unhear it. And it's now going to become this truth about me in your eyes. And she said to me, you know, when you tell me stuff like that, it has no bearing on how attracted to you I am. It makes me love you more. I see more parts of you. It does not change. It doesn't take away any of the other ways that you are. Like, it just allows me to view you holistically and see as a whole who you are, which I love. I always love knowing more about you. And it doesn't change any of those ways that you show up, that you're sexy, you're confident, or you're bold, or any of that. It doesn't change how manly I see. It doesn't change any of it. It just allows me to know more about you. And I don't know if I believed her the exact first time she said that, but over time, I began to realize that the more I showed of myself, it was having no impact on her attraction for me. It had no impact on, you know, our sex life. It had no impact on how the moments where she made me feel powerful. She didn't stop making me feel powerful in the moments where I was being those things either. And that for me has like been a very corrective and healing experience. It's changed. I've never felt like I can be more vulnerable than I am today. And I don't feel now, actually my confidence has also, I think, shifted in the sense that I don't feel like by sharing this thing, it makes me not that thing. Because she's created a space where there's room for all of those things. And that for me, like when I realized what she gave me was something I couldn't give to myself or didn't give to myself for basically my whole life until these last couple of years, which is to look at the regrets I have, to look at the things I've done that I feel ashamed for, to look at the things I've done that I feel guilty about or that I don't want to identify with because I'm just like, I hate that I was that person, or I hate that I was like that, or I hate that. All those shame, all those things that I carry around with me that I think if people knew that, they would no longer like me. They would no longer think I'm a great person. They would know. What I was able to do then is start to view myself holistically and contextually, and to see, behind that action that I'm not proud of or I regret was a scared person, or was someone who was desperately in need of love and did not know how to get it, was desperately looking for connection and did not know how to get it, was desperately trying to feel a sense of control and did not know how to get it. And that, the way she modeled that for me has been incredibly healing for me, like life-changingly healing for me. Like it's been one of the most important discoveries of my life. And I'm still on that. I'm still doing
Discovery, what do you mean? What'd you discover?
That I could actually take what I thought were the darkest parts of me, and I could see something behind them. I could see whatever I was trying to get something, I was trying to feel something, I was trying to, feel love or feel in control or feel I was scared, wounded, whatever it may be. And that I am not that mistake. I am whatever was behind it that still exists in me today, albeit that part of me might have better tools today, or a better frame of reference, or a better way of coping with life, or a better way of handling life. That to me is game changing, because now, like, for as long as, and I think guys do this all the time, I think that we fracture ourselves because we're like, that side of me is so ugly or so fragile or so despicable or so shameful or so that I dare not talk about it. And if anyone knew about that side of me, I would no longer be lovable. And I feel like whoever is out there working with men, and that the shame that they carry and the guilt that they carry and all the ways that they tell themselves either that they're, either they're so embarrassed about their weak moments and they live with them and they torment themselves over them, and they, I should have stood up to that person 7 years ago. Like I should have done something. I should have, like the ways men torture themselves about that, or the ways they torture themselves about the transgressions or the things that they wish they had done differently, or the way they hurt someone that they've still not been able to forgive themselves for. I think whoever is doing that work with men is like changing the world. Because when us men feel shame and when we fracture ourselves in that way, that's to me the root of just so many problems.
What's so useful in that story is that it went wrong the first time. Mm-hmm. And I have a feeling that a lot of men, they stop at the first time. Mm-hmm. And whether that's somebody in high school that says a thing that they're not even dating, but they just throw that in their face, or they are in a relationship and they finally allow themselves to be vulnerable and it gets thrown back in their face. short of finding someone like Audrey, how do they come back from that? So there's a lot of talk about men integrating their shadows, the dark side of their personality. But how do they, without needing somebody else to be the salve, how do they integrate that part of themselves without needing somebody to accept it? Or is the healing only possible when you can find somebody that can stand in that and be like, yeah, you're good?
That's such an interesting question. I think I had already begun to do it, which was what helped me, because some people are not, they could meet someone like Audrey and they still wouldn't be able to go there. The reason I was able to go there and I needed like a nudge as opposed to like a baseball bat to the head is like I had already been doing that work with a therapist. I had already been sharing more with certain people in my life. And, you know, with my parents, with certain very close friends, I had started that process of sharing things that I felt like were unacceptable about me. And for me, that had already begun almost this external modeling of what I needed to do for myself. But realizing that there were certain people in my life that didn't run away from me or didn't abandon me or didn't, you know, that the things that I thought were like deeply shameful, they were like, you're fine. Like that was a very, very like healing experience for me. So I don't think that you have to find it in the company of a romantic partner immediately. I think that you can find reference points for what that is like. It's one of the reasons I think men's groups are really great, is because you can start to, if you're in the right men's group, you can start to, you know, not only show those things about yourself, but you can hear other men talk about things that you thought only you did, or only you felt shame over, or only you felt insecure over. And that's just, there's something deeply powerful about that. At least then you know what to look for when you find it. At least you've had experiences that when it comes to meeting a romantic partner, you know the feeling I'm looking for is the feeling I had in that group of people, or with that therapist, or with that friend, where I can share something about myself and it brings us closer. It isn't met with just insane levels of contempt or judgment or disgust or you pushing me away. And there's someone there's someone who is that, like, not everyone can be that for you. That's the other thing. Like, it doesn't make them a bad person that they can't be that for you. It just makes them not right for you, because they may not understand the particular pattern of your past and what's made you the way you are. And the more colorful your past is, and the more difficult your past has been, and the more kind of, you know, messy or chaotic it's been, or the more unique your childhood was, the more you're going to either need someone with extraordinary levels of empathy who can truly just has that preternatural ability to see what you're saying and to connect with it, even though it's not their experience, or you need someone who kind of gets it. And that's, you know, that, I think that's when you know you've found something really special, is when it's like, again, if I could say anything to guys out there, I think that ends up having to take precedent over some egoic pursuit of whatever you've said you wanted in the past, or whatever you think is the holy grail of what you need to attain in looks, or the, you know, this or that, whatever it is. It's, who do I feel the most myself with? Who do I feel like I'm home with? Who makes me feel more of me, like the meest me? And who rewards me the more they know about me? Like, that's a pretty great thing that's like the ultimate. I honestly think there's like nothing more healing than that. I keep using that word because it may not relate to some people, but it's the best. I'm not, like, everyone should know, I am not, there's nothing about me, anyone who knows me knows I'm not Mr. Spiritual. I am hyper rational, hyper logical, humanist, can't like find myself, I just am not naturally drawn to anything that feels like.
You're not wearing any crystals right now?
I have no crystals, complete absence of crystals in my house. But I really think of this as healing. I do. I know it's a word used by a lot of people that, you may not relate to out there, but I really think that that's what we're doing. And I think that's one of the best things a relationship can offer, is that you
say that's what we're doing. What do you mean?
What did I say?
Who's the we? That's what we're doing. We're healing. I just don't know who the we is.
Well, I think that's where happiness lies for so many of us, is in these things that plague us. The whatever version of trauma you've been through, whatever difficult experiences you've held on to, whatever wound you're still trying to salve with every date you go on with someone that has nothing in common with you but looks the part, with every extra, $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million that you're trying to make. There's just, there's something there for so many of us that we think is going to get fixed by that stuff. And that work that I'm doing now, that I've realized how fortunate I am to have someone to do that with. But trust me, I would be doing it with or without this marriage. I would, for me, once I realized, like, oh, there's stuff going on with me that is just not going away on its own, unless I actually treat this like my workouts, unless I treat it like going to the gym or any other, building a business or any other part of my life where, I need to get better at this. This is not going to get better. And I also saw, like, really great guys around us, like our friend Lewis Howes. Like, you see people like that who, we were in a meeting with him last year and a whole bunch of other people. And the number one thing that people were saying around that table is, you seem really peaceful right now. You compared to a couple of years ago, you just seem in this really peaceful place. And I think when you see that around you, especially as a guy, and we're not all, for a lot of guys, it can feel harder to do that kind of work or to talk about it or to have the community to talk about it with. When you see a person in your life who you value, who you admire, and you see them become more peaceful, you want to know what they did. Like, how did you do that? And I know he's doing that same kind of work.
We are both the shout and the echo. That is an idea that I think people would do very well to internalize. I don't know. So my advice to people would be, if you go through something like that, where you are vulnerable with somebody, they throw it back in your face and it sort of breaks a part of you, you do have to do the work, whatever that is exactly, to be okay on your own if nobody is ever able to hold space for that. I think that's very important to acknowledge. That's the shout. But I don't know if you ever really get to the other side of it. You can armor up. You can callous over it. In fact, thinking about it, that's exactly what I would do, is just not need anyone else to hold that space for me, to be able to do it for myself, to integrate it. It's a part of me, craft a story in my mind that allows me to have a shameful thing, but not let it define me. But there is, if you clip out the last, 15 minutes or whatever of you talking, the way you were making me feel is exactly why I say that a relationship, a real healthy adult relationship, is the greatest thing that life has to offer you. If there's kids in the room, I can't remember if I said anything before this point that they should leave for, but now's probably the time. Relationships are utterly fascinating. And I think part of the reason, so the one thing that I'm not sure you and I see exactly the same is, I feel like we're in a cultural soup, which has become my obsession. That cultural soup does some things well and some things very, very poorly. And I think that it is the modern dating culture is so catastrophically broken that even people that are trying not to get trapped are in many ways getting trapped. But not to derail on that, the thing that I would love people to understand is, okay, you need to do that work. You need to be the shout. You need to get tough. You need to callous over those problems. If you've had some sort of rejection like that, you need a strong base. But you don't want to get to the point where you have so many layers of armor that you're not able to reap the benefit of a relationship where you can also let your guard down, where you, and I say also very intentionally, because I think that part of the story that I hope ends up getting out to men today is that you need to be capable of, I'm going to use hyperbolic words because they feel better than the more sedate words, but you need to be capable of violence. I don't mean that literally, sort of, but you need to be capable of great violence, and you need to be capable of being soft and unguarded with somebody that has proven that they won't use your insecurities against you, which is a rule that Lisa and I have in our marriage, which is you never weaponize somebody's insecurities against them. And when I say do great violence, I mean like to be able to stand your ground mentally, emotionally, and physically if it comes to that. But physically is probably the one in last place given a modern context. But intellectually, to be able to stand your ground, to know where you're at. And that integrated whole is, I think, what the modern male should be striving towards. But understanding that the echo of how people look at you is going to matter to you, whether you want it to or not. So the question becomes, how do you do that artfully? Like, how do you trust but not dump, create intimacies without overplaying your hand so that you can build towards something great? And this is going back to where I started the interview of wanting to understand, like, what are the bricks that you lay along that path? Because seduction is part of the game that leads to the final thing where you have a deep romantic relationship where you can be vulnerable and all that stuff. But you don't get there if you don't understand all the steps along the path. And the reason I said if you have kids, now might be the time to have them leave. A high functioning relationship goes from, hi, my name is Tom, to me putting my penis in very exciting places, to trust and vulnerability and holding the same space for them and absorbing their vulnerabilities and creating space and helping them reframe what they mean, and really together creating a paradigm by which you help each other integrate those parts of themselves. Because there is, like, you said this and I said this in sort of different ways. You said Audrey hit you with a standard, but also held the space for you. Lisa told me, after hearing me complain about something over and over and over, that's not sexy, right? I think your woman said that's not attractive. I mean, it's like, it isn't. And so guys need to understand that there is both, you have a responsibility to deal with that thing, but in a healthy relationship where you can help each other navigate that, where there's grace, where it doesn't become, you're that guy who did that thing. It's so complicated.
That, by the way, what you just articulated is exactly what I meant at the very beginning about the paradox between being accepted for who you are, but who you are being someone or something, a package that is enough for somebody else.
Yeah.
And those two things seem in some way antithetical, because it feels contradictory to say you should be accepted for who you are, but who you are has to be enough.
But that's the truth.
But yes, I think it's a paradox to be managed. I do see it as a kind of paradox. And I think all the debate about people's love lives and people who are angry at advice because they're like, you just have to be yourself, versus the people who give advice who are like, but wait, there really are things you can do that make you more attractive and that make you better at this and make you more competent when it comes to attraction. It's all two sides of that paradox fighting each other all the time. And I have such empathy for both because I connect deeply with both. I know for sure there are plenty of things in my videos over 17 years of making videos that are purely related to competence. So much so that like I feel like if anyone's watching this for the first time and me for the first time on this interview, they are thinking of me as the person who talks a lot about feelings and isn't highly practical in like strategy out there for people's love lives. But that was my like DNA. My DNA, if you go back through my old videos, is about you can do this. This will help you become more attractive. This will change the way you're seen by other people. And whenever anyone railed against me and like, you just have to be yourself, why are you saying all of these things? I'd be like, I would have every great argument for why that wasn't true. I would always be like, the reason that you're listening to me right now, the reason that you're even seeing my video is because I am competent as a speaker. I have learned things that allow me to deliver a message and an argument in a certain way, with a certain level of charisma, with a certain level of structure and great metaphor. And it's entertaining as well as educational. All of the competence that I have built there has helped me to reach you. So when you say about your love life, there's nothing that you need to learn, that to me is the same thing as you saying to me, there's nothing you need to learn about presentation. It's patently untrue to me. And our love life is one of those areas where people often think it lives in a special kind of zone of every other area of our lives. We accept that there are things we can do to get better at them. No one starts you on your first day of work and your boss doesn't say to you, just be yourself, I'll see you in a year. They say there's things you have to learn to be able to do this job well. We're going to teach you. We're going to train you, because competence is a huge part of being great at your job, not just confidence or self-acceptance. At the same time, I have a fundamental belief that the right person for us is someone who accepts where we are on our path right now. That the person, if that idea of, if I'd have only been more advanced, I would have held on to that person. If I'd have, not been where I was at that time in my life, then it wasn't your person. It wasn't the right person. It was someone who met you at a time in your life where that wasn't someone who was able to make space for where you were on your journey. If you're a recovering alcoholic and you're early in that path and you meet someone who's like, I can't do this, you would need to be way further on your journey for me to be able to handle you. There's no point lamenting that person. If I'd have only been 5 years sober and had more of a handle on this, that person would have been my perfect person. It wasn't your perfect person. The perfect person for you is the person that can make space for exactly where you're at right now. That is the puzzle piece that fits well with their puzzle piece. And I really, really believe that. I think it's science fiction to think that we met the right person at the wrong time. You in a parallel universe, there's a version of you that was at a completely different place in your life and they were at a different place in theirs and it all worked out. Not this universe. You wishing for something else is science fiction. You were never, I'm a bit of a determinist in the way that I think. I really don't think, this point I'm at in my life now, I don't think I could have got there any sooner. I don't think there was anything that I maybe if the right mentor had come along in a different moment, maybe that would have nudged me on a different track, and that would have I would have ended up somewhere different. But everything that's happened to me has meant that I am where I am today. I fundamentally believe that, and that I take a lot of comfort in that. You know, I find that to be a good recipe for self-forgiveness, because I do just look at it and go, if I could have done better, I would have done better. That's as good as I could do. My best might have been tragic, but that was the best I could do at that time. And my best is better today, thank God. And you know, the right person for me is the person that sees where I am today and says, okay. So those seem like contradictory ideas, but to me, we have to find a way to fit them together. That doesn't mean, that's not our mandate to stay the same forever. It's still, it contains the possibility of being better, of showing up differently. And I think that we can show up differently with the right person too. I think that's another thing that makes someone the right person. I think that the way Audrey connected with my insecurity and the way she made me feel safe in the relationship made me even more confident in the relationship. So I am a sexier version of myself who's more secure. But a big part of that is because she has helped me be secure because of the safety that she brings to the relationship. Mm. If she was someone who lived her life in a way that constantly made me feel unsafe because of the ways that she was acting with other people and the ways that she was, you know, the kinds of texts she was sending out on her phone and the way she was like, then I might not be the same level of confidence that I am right now. But the way she feeds into that confidence also helps me be the confident person that she finds sexy and attractive. So like, that's also part and parcel of, I found someone who fits well with me. How many people are in a relationship where they feel unsafe and insecure all the time, and they're internalizing that and making it about themselves, but they're just in a relationship that fundamentally makes them feel unsafe and insecure all the time. So it's a dance. It is always a dance between those two things. Yeah.
Why do people stay in relationships that make them feel unsafe and insecure?
A number of reasons, I think. Scarcity. I'm never going to find anything else. I'm never going to find anyone better.
Praise Jesus. If they make you feel unsafe and insecure, why would you want to find anybody else? I don't understand.
Well, because I don't think we're focusing on our happiness. We're focusing on the thing that we think is going to make us feel worthy. And the thing that's going to make us feel worthy is holding on to this person. If I can get this person, if I can get their approval, if I can make them happy, if I can make them love me, if I can hold on to them and not have them dump me, then that will make me feel enough. But when we're doing that, we're not focusing on our happiness. We're just focusing on what we think might make us feel like we're enough. So we fight and fight and fight.
Yeah. This is crazy to me. Crazy. So,
but maybe you're very in touch with what makes you feel good, and you gravitate towards that.
Yes, but I am coming more and more to the realization that people just have to have rules in their lives, and people don't have rules, and so they find themselves in a situation like that. I have a rule in my life. I would never stay in a relationship that made me feel worse about myself. That does not make sense. That doesn't compute for me. So, do you have rules?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, for me, that I wouldn't be in a relationship that didn't make me feel more peaceful. Like that peace became a really important word for me, especially because I'd lived a life where, you know, I'd experienced a lot of chaos in my life for a very long time, and, you know, came from a lot of chaos. And it, for me, feeling it stopped being important for me to find spikes in life. I was like, I need to feel safe. I need to feel like who I'm with is creating a peaceful existence with me. So that for me became my like kind of my North Star. It didn't mean I didn't want passion. I for sure wanted passion. I'm a passionate person, so I couldn't be in a relationship where there wasn't passion. But if it was passionate without peace, there's no way for me. I could have been in another relationship like that. And that's to me, that's the solution. What you just said is the solution, actually. That chapter I have on rewire your brain, the first two steps in that are make change necessary, because you don't need to believe that you can get better or that you can find someone better. You just need to believe that you can never do this again. Like, I just can't. It's too painful. You know, when people stop being with a certain kind of person, it's often not that they've become more confident. It's just that they know for sure that this kind of person makes my life miserable. So if you connect with that and how miserable it's made you in the past, then you will naturally say no to that in the future if you deeply connect to it. And the second thing is you have to choose what's most important to you going forward. What's the thing that I can't live without? And usually a good question to ask yourself is, what did I not have in my last relationship that, despite how important I was making that relationship, not having that thing made me utterly miserable? And it could have been loyalty, it could have been empathy, it could have been kindness, it could have been a teammate, whatever it was. That thing now has to become the really important thing, because you know that no matter how much you are attracted to someone, or no matter how important you think someone is, or how much you want them, if you don't have that thing, you're still miserable. It's still hell in the relationship. So you start to prioritize that thing. And you say, it's not the only thing I need, but if I don't have this, nothing else matters. And that's like a rule, as you would say, that secures a future of either not having someone or a future of having people who actually bring you the things that you want. And then you have to be prepared to communicate that path. But that goes into the whole rest of the chapter. But that's really, really important, because if you don't define that going in, this isn't like writing your ideal partner checklist. This is, what's the thing I can't live without? And if I know what that is, then that has to be the benchmark. That has to be like the price of entry for any relationship in my life going forward. And that will eliminate 90% of the wrong relationships for you right off the bat.
Man, I really want to know. So women that end up putting 6 figures, 6 inches, 6-pack abs, and 6 feet tall, it's like, okay, that's whatever, 3% of the population. I'm so curious to know, like, when people put down the I need this, even though they're not things you're going to put into a dating app, like, how much does that narrow the field? As I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm like, oh man, I wish you were ugly. Because if you were ugly, I want to see like how much of this stuff would survive you being like just unattractive. Because I'm with you, man. But the thing I worry about all the time is that the only real gatekeeper is intelligence. And that everything else is like decoration on, if you're smart enough, like, you will figure it out. Dude, Einstein was not exactly a good looking guy. I don't think he was tall, but I mean, he had, I hate to say it, but he had extramarital affairs. Like, he did not have a hard time with women. And yeah, like, how, I'm trying to put my black pill hat on for a minute. Do you know black pill?
No, what's the distinction between
God.
red and black?
So red pill is like, the world works a different way than you're being told. You're being sold a bill of goods. Let me tell you what women are really like. Let me tell you what the world's really like. You need to hold frame, make these bitches submit. That's red pill. They're probably going to hate that, but I think that's pretty good. Black pill is, bro, you can be so ugly or so short or so whatever. You're just fucked. You're going to be alone forever. Just take your black pill and fucking deal with it. There's nothing you can do. Nothing. You're done. Finished.
Oh, so red pill is more like train your body.
Yeah, you got this. Get rich, get jacked.
Got it. And black
Penis
pill is
pump,
like, there's nothing
you're good.
you can do.
Facts. So when you lay out like the journey that I really want to take guys on, because I haven't even laid out for you yet my most terrifying hypothesis, which we're going to get to.
By the way, for everyone out there watching this, this is not like Tom's hypotheses are not, this isn't like my first encounter with them. Like we will be at dinner and Tom will be like, here's my hypothesis.
Yes.
And I will be very, very entertained and terrified listening to it. So if this is a new one that I haven't experienced over dinner, I'm excited.
You won't have heard it put this succinctly because I don't think I had it this succinct until recently. But going back to the, how do people build from, I'm bitter, I'm angry, I'm resentful, I'm in this horrendous cultural soup that I'm in right now. I have an antagonistic sense of women, but I want to get to that point where you're talking about being vulnerable, having an integrated relationship, being able to hold that kind of space for each other. That thing I said where you created this feeling in that like 15-ish minute segment where you were able to make me feel in real time the very thing that makes relationships worth all the sacrifice and all that. But how do you go from I feel invisible, which is something I wanted to get back to that you said multiple times for men and women. I feel invisible. I don't know how to do the dance. Yeah, I'd love to filter people out that aren't good for me, but bro, I'm invisible.
Uh-huh.
Do you have, like, what are those steps that you walk people through where they can get to, like, if this is Maslow's hierarchy and the part that we just went through is sort of self-actualization at the very tippy top, like, how do we go through some of those base ones in order to get there?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, in terms of how can I not be invisible? There's almost like the obvious things that are so obvious as to be boring. Like it makes no sense not to do the best you can with what you have, looks wise, right?
Go to the gym.
Go
take a shower, shave.
Exact, smell good. You know, like it is interesting that people neglect to do some of the things that truly anyone can do. Like truly. If you can smell good, but you don't smell good, like that you can change. And if you are unshaven and you could groom, then groom. If you can get, I'm not talking about expensive clothes, but if you can just get an outfit that's put together, go on Instagram and just look at people who are putting their clothes together well, and then go out and get a very cheap version of that and put it together well. It's extraordinary how much none of us would notice that what you're wearing is the cheap version of that. Those things are just worth doing. And I always think it's miraculous how much we can actually impact the way we look. So there's that. And there's, you know, I'm a big believer in training.
Working out.
In working out. I'm a big believer because
Your shoulders confirm that.
Well, I'm someone who doesn't obsess with working out, but like for me, the psychological benefits outweigh the aesthetic benefits all day long.
Facts.
The way it makes me proud of myself, the way it makes me feel energized or feel like I can attack other difficult things in my life, having done that. I haven't worked out in the last like 5 days. It's been like podcasts and running around.
I was going to say, you've really let yourself go. It's disgusting.
Wait till you see me at the end of this book launch. But my and Audrey's mums are in town, and it's just been like one thing too many. And for sure, I feel worse for having not done that. And when I say that's over 5 days, and I look at someone who hasn't worked out in the last 5 years,
and their diet's terrible,
what that will be doing to that person's psychology is profound. And this isn't me saying everyone needs to be some kind of CrossFit, like killing yourself type. It's not that. It's just movement. What that does for us psychologically, I think, is profound. And I feel like, I've said this before, I don't know if I mean it or not, but you'll get the point. I really feel like every coach or therapist should be like, go work out for a week every day and then come back and tell me about what's bothering you. Because what bothers us is different through the lens of I'm moving my body.
Yeah. Get sleep, get sunlight, work out, and eat right.
Yeah.
Don't lament over anything, not depression, not
Yeah.
anxiety, not dating until you've done that.
Because I can't trust myself when I'm not doing something physical.
Not only that, if you have control of your body, you have control of your mind. If you don't have control of your mind, you are never going to succeed in dating. It is way too complicated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
preach.
I'm such a believer in that. So I think that not again, not trying to promote like everyone should be this body type, just the psychological side of it, if nothing else. Is it Jordan Peterson who talks about making your bed and cleaning your room and doing that? I believe in that. I do. I feel instantly better the moment I make my space nice.
How dare you? It's the one thing I respond violently to.
Is what, like tidying?
Cleaning or making your bed, I think, is a fool's errand. But I don't want to derail us on that. I get your point.
No, but are you like that with your desk space and with other
Yes.
spaces as well? You just don't care?
Everything
How do
has
you
to
find
be in a
anything?
knowable position. That's the only thing that matters. As long as you know where everything is. The problem is I'm married to a person that hides everything. That shit winds me up. It is the biggest point of friction in my marriage after 21 years.
So then this clearly isn't prescriptive, but or mass prescriptive, but I find just having a handle on my space, if my space is chaotic, I am like psychologically, I'm not in as good of a space as I can be.
My wife agrees with you. She is.
You might, but
exactly
it
the
might
same.
be like my wife thinks you're a genius. Legitimately, she's like, I think Tom's a genius.
She needs to see someone.
and it might be like one of those genius things, you know, like if you ever watch Sherlock Holmes and his stuff's everywhere and he's a genius, but he's like a sort of, there's a romantic notion of like genius is just having books everywhere and everything's in like nothing's where it should be.
Pure laziness. I just need to know where things are. I'm an efficiency freak. It causes problems.
Right. Yeah. Well, you do take that to its like extreme.
Yes,
but
to a pathological extreme.
I would say for any normal human being, tidy your space and get things in order, because I do think it makes a difference to our psychology. And also, by the way, imagine that tomorrow someone was coming to your place. Imagine an hour from now, someone was showing up at your apartment or your house. Are you proud? Do you like what they're going to see? And if the answer is no, then there's already some subconscious, like, you know, you're going out on a date tonight, and if that person came back with you, you would be embarrassed by what they see. There's an incongruency there that needs to be addressed. It should be that someone can show up an hour from now and you feel like you're well represented. So I think that's an important thing. I do believe that having a sense of purpose in life that makes you connected to something that means whatever result you get out there today in your love life, it feels like there's something as important going on in your life, or there's something happening in your life that you're making, creating, learning about, investing in, that really connects you to life, to a sense of purpose, that you feel like you're doing something meaningful. Feel like you're doing something on some level that's important. At least you can connect what you're doing to something important, and that you feel that, because that's like a lot of the reasons we're constantly clawing after these things that will give us status is because we haven't we haven't made our life, no matter how small our life is, we haven't made it big in our mind. And I really believe that people have to, you have to connect to what's great about your life or what's big about your life. There's a in A Man for All Seasons, there's a moment where I think it's Sir Thomas More is talking to Richard Rich, and Richard Rich is like this aspiring, like he's trying to like get ahead, and he really wants to have status and power in court, and Sir Thomas More says to him, why not be a teacher? I think he says you'd be an excellent teacher. And so Richard Rich says, but who would know? And he says, your pupils, God, not a bad public. And I I can think back to situations in my life where it felt like someone had a very big life, and it was, in comparison, it felt like, oh, my life is small, or my life feels insignificant. And very quickly you can devalue the things that you bring to the table or the meaning in what you do. If you look after your sick mother, or you're someone who handles dementia patients, like you live a big life in your way. Stay connected to your life. Stay connected to what you're doing, because then no one can come along and intimidate you just because they have more, or they've done more, or because it seems like on the surface they have a shinier life. It's not just about creating a sense of purpose in your life. It's about connecting to the purpose and the meaning in the things you already do, so that no one can come along and intimidate you and make you feel like what you're doing isn't important. That to me is like, if you don't, so much of life is connection. Connect to what's important about what you do, who you are. You can have everything in this life, and your life will still be never big enough if you don't connect to that. And you're still always looking over your shoulder at someone else who's doing something bigger or better, or comparing yourself to somebody else. And when someone does really connect to the importance of their life, there's something very, very attractive about that. When you could be someone who lives the biggest life in the world, and then you come across someone who, it looks on the surface like their world is much, much smaller, but man, are they connected to what they do.
Dude,
and do they love it?
I think this is really important for people to understand. I once made a woman orgasm.
I didn't know that was going to be the start of the next
Right?
sentence.
From something that I said to her the night before. It was weird. It was so like, oh my God. She'd never seen me be passionate before. And I clicked over like the night before and like got really passionate. It was the first time she'd ever seen it. And then the next morning we had sex and she had an orgasm for the first time. And I was like, this isn't about this moment. This is about last night. I was like, holy shit, because I was connected to what I was doing and all that, and I was conveying it. It's very interesting. Now let me paint a picture for you. You're playing video games all day, except for when you're checking in on your OnlyFans subscriptions.
Okay.
And you're spending a serious amount of quality time with pornography. You are taking advice from Andrew Tate, and your place is a mess. So somebody rolls up and that's what they walk into. Mm-hmm. Does that person need to tell themselves a better story about the things that they're doing? Or does that person need to change what they're doing?
I suppose I might start by asking that person, who is it that you would like to attract? Like, paint me a picture of the kind of person you want. And I would be surprised if the picture they painted was the equivalent of them in the other gender. That would be very surprising to me. If they wanted, I would try to focus on the kind of person they would like to attract, and then point out the incongruencies between the way they're living their life and the way that person is living their life. Because that would say a lot. Because what you cannot do is expect to attract someone who is playing on a different level than you in the way that they are approaching their life. That's, you have to be willing to do the thing that you expect from somebody else. So, and by the way, it might even be that, let's just say, the person at the baseline, the person you want to attract, wants to be with someone who is proud of themselves or takes pride in themselves. If you can honestly tell me that you truly take pride in the lifestyle you live, in the way you're getting up each day, in the way you're playing out each day, if you truly feel not comfortable, if you feel pride in it, if you feel proud of yourself, and you feel like this is you taking care of yourself, then okay, this is a different conversation. We might have to have a reality check on how many people are going to be, like, you might be a real small niche for people, but at least you're coming from that place. But if the place you're coming from is deep down, I have so much shame around the way I live my life, I really don't like myself, I hate myself, in fact, I am not taking care of myself, then you have to start from a place of the person that I attract deserves to have someone who is taking care of themselves, who is proud of themselves. There's a part of the book that I feel like is relevant to this, because
Love Life by Matthew Hussey.
Love Life. How to raise your standards, find your person, and live happily no matter what.
It's good.
There's a chapter called Core Confidence where I talk about self-love. And if I suppose I start with how much of a problem I have with the way self-love is portrayed as a message, because I think it is, maybe you'll like this, I don't know, we'll see. The self-love, the model for self-love did not work for me.
Agreed.
Did not work for me. It didn't make sense to me. It felt like my intelligence just dismantled it immediately. And I would do this with audiences in real time. I would say to audiences, why should you love yourself? Because I would want to externalize the dialogue that was going on in my head with the audience. I'd say, why should you love yourself? Because we're all being told, love yourself. You've got to love yourself. That's the key. That's the great key. If you want a great love life, if you want confidence, you've got to love yourself. I'd say to audiences, why should you love yourself? People would pause for a few seconds, because often that's not like a thing that people say. People say, love yourself, run a bubble bath, light a candle, but no. Why? Someone would say, because we deserve it. And I'd go, okay, why? And they'd say, people would pause for a minute, and they'd say, well, because I'm a good person, because I'm kind, because I do a lot for my family, because I'm empathetic, or any of those things. And when I would hear that, all I would hear is, you just switched to needing to find traits in yourself or behaviors that made you lovable. There's a problem here. First, what about the days where you're not kind? What about the days where you're selfish? What about the days where you said a mean thing and you hurt someone's feelings? What about the times in your life where you have deep regret about the way you behaved or acted? Do you not deserve love on those days? People wouldn't know how to answer. And I'd say, and even when you're being those things that you say make you worthy of self-love, what about when someone walks into the room who's better at those things? Are they more worthy of love than you? And people would go, And then someone would say something like, well, we should love ourselves because we're special. I'd say, but why are you special? Isn't everyone special? Yes. Well, then no one's special. Like, what does special mean in that context? And even if you say I'm special, it's still, a kid can come home from getting picked last for basketball and say to their parent, I got picked last. I feel awful. And the parent says, but you're so special. Yeah, but I still got picked last for basketball. And the parent says, well, the parent often switches. Well, but you're so smart. You're so intelligent. But at some point, that intelligent kid who maybe now validates herself on being intelligent goes to some Ivy League university and sits in a room at Harvard and suddenly doesn't feel that intelligent anymore. They are surrounded by people at that level of intelligence. And so now they're into comparison mode and feeling like they're not enough again. And oh, my reason for loving myself is evaporating. So I would say this idea that we have to find these reasons to love ourselves is actually kind of broken. And it almost follows like a romantic model of how we love. We find someone with great qualities or great traits and we fall in love with them. But the problem with that kind of love is it doesn't work on ourselves. We fall in love with someone because there's a sense of mystery and there's a kind of space between us and we want to close it down. And so we fall in love and we get closer and closer and closer. And by the way, what's that famous phrase that people say about long-term relationships? If you're not careful, familiarity breeds contempt. And a lot of long-term relationships fail because two people become so familiar with each other that they take each other for granted and they know all of each other's flaws and they stop seeing the good and they focus on the bad and now they have contempt and now they break up. Well, if familiarity breeds contempt, who would you have more contempt for than the person you have spent every second of your life with until now? What in your relationship with yourself, what emotion, what other emotion is there even room for by that logic? So then you say, okay, then what does it mean to love myself? On what basis should I love myself? I am not, Narcissus in Greek mythology looked in a pool of water and immediately fell in love with himself. We, the rest of us, mere mortals, we can't even seem to find the ability to like ourselves, a lot of us, let alone love ourselves. So why should you love yourself? I believe that self-love needs a rebrand. And we need a completely different model for it. The romantic model doesn't work. So what's the other model? I would start looking at the parent-child relationship and almost imagining asking, and I did ask a bunch of parents this, why should you love your child? Or why do you love your child? And almost no parents, in response to that question, start giving you a list of traits of their child or how they did at school this week. They're not giving you a report card. You say, why do you love your child? And the parent says, what are you talking about? Because they're my child. Because it's my son. Because that's my daughter. People are like that with their pets too. Right? It's like you say to someone, why do you love your pet? What do you mean? It's my pet. If you said to someone there are some ugly dogs. If you walk down the street and you see someone with a really ugly dog and it is just missing 3/4 of its fur and it's got no teeth and its tongue is hanging out and it just looks like barely alive. If you walk up to that person and say, do you want to exchange your dog for a more handsome, stately dog? That person will look at you like you're insane. What are you talking about? This is my dog. If you look at a child with their stuffed toy, a child is like that with their stuffed toy. You try exchanging a child's like stuffed rabbit for a better rabbit that's stitched up and looks great. They won't have it. This is my rabbit. So when I started looking at those relationships, it was very clear to me there's a different kind of relationship at play. And that, for me, started to change the way that I saw love with myself. So I would look at myself and go, oh, in the same way that someone with their child would say, I love my child because they're my child, they're mine. I am actually mine. I am my human. Maybe someone had to raise me for a few years. And for any of us, the person who raised you may or may not have done a good job, but it was their job to usher you into a phase of your life where you came to realize that the person who had custody for this human was you. And when you realize that, you say, comparison makes no sense with other people. I can't exchange this human for another human. I just have this one human. And I have one job. That's it. One job. Take care of this human. Give this human the best life you can give this human. That's it. I don't need to believe I'm special. I don't need to think that I have anything special going for me. You don't think that when you have a child. You just think my job is to give this human the best life I can give it. And the same is true for ourselves. We're 1 in 8 billion. Trying to believe you're special in 1 in 8 billion is almost impossible, right? But I can believe that I'm the only one in this 8 billion people on this earth who has this relationship with this human. No one else has the job of looking after this human. It is solely my job. And if I'm watching porn every day, listening to mentors that spit hate and just talk to me about things that pollute my brain, playing video games for 12 hours a day, subscribing to OnlyFans, eating poorly, not taking care of myself, then I am sleeping on the one job I have in this world, which is to take care of this human. You're human. So the next time someone says to you, why do you love yourself? It's like the response internally is because I'm mine. And that, when I look at it through that lens and I think of that person, it goes to the heart of the argument to me for men and women is if we are not careful, the trap in life is I am going to fall into into an incessant complaining about my lot, about what I didn't get, about what I wasn't blessed with, about how easy other people have it compared to me, about how poorly people treat me. And all of that is sleeping on the job. Because your job is not to judge the ingredients you have. Your job is just to give that human the best life you can possibly give that human. And if you do that, if you start approaching your life that way, that is the deepest source of confidence you can possibly have. By the way, it doesn't mean you like yourself. You don't have to like yourself to love yourself. It turns loving yourself into a verb instead of a noun. Loving myself doesn't have to be a feeling. I don't have to feel love towards myself. Loving myself is an approach. It's what am I doing to take care of this human today? Because it's my job. It's my responsibility to take care of this human today. The liking yourself part, by the way, can come later. I think of that like you think of raising kids, where it's like after 18 years, you might see the majority of the fruits of that labor, where that kid starts to recognize all of the things you did for them when they were a child, but they didn't recognize it at the time. That can be the same in your relationship with yourself. You love yourself today, worry about liking yourself later. And when we do that, I believe that we will naturally become more attractive. We will naturally start to do the things that make us more attractive and start to get us noticed by a kind of person that maybe didn't notice us until now. But when you're not taking care of yourself, when you are sleeping on the one job you have in this world, and then resentful that someone else isn't showing up for you, there is a fundamental disconnect about what your job is in this world.
I like that answer a lot. I like that answer a lot more than I expected to. When you started, I thought, yeah, I bet we see this the same way. I'm glad you said that it's different than liking yourself. I'd say it's different than respecting yourself, which is how I've always come at it, that you have to earn your own respect.
Yep.
Which means you have to decide what you think is worthy of respect and then actually do those things. But love yourself as a verb, as an approach, because you're the only human you get. I really like that. That's really good. Okay, I have a terrible hypothesis I would like to lay out for you.
I'm so excited about this.
I want to see what you think.
Do you know,
Please.
every time Audrey comes, like, because Audrey will come and visit you, or will come and visit Lisa, and like that, she just will come home to me at the end of spending time with Lisa at your house, going, I'm really, really anxious. And it will always be because at some point during her time with Lisa,
I can see where this is going.
you, like maybe you were on just like a little break from, you know, just crushing some project in a different part of the house, and you'll come like just for a little kitchen break or something. You'll walk through the room, you'll drop a grenade about like the end of the world or something awful that's going to happen, something apocalyptic, something dystopian, and then you will leave.
Yeah.
But I'm the one who feels the effects of what you have done.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You don't keep Audrey for the night. She comes back to me while I'm trying to sleep, and she now can't sleep because you have made her feel like it's all coming to some terrible end.
I like to. It's always delivered with a smile and a laugh.
I'm sure that helps.
I want to be clear.
Yeah.
Apparently not, but I always tell Lisa it's dangerous to have me come and say hello when you're having a girls' evening. But apparently she does not realize that I'm sending people home with a massive amount of anxiety. Here's what I'm worried about. Okay, the pill was invented in whatever 1965. Gives women complete freedom over their reproduction. Amazing. I got to take huge advantage of that in the early days of my marriage when I could not have been more paranoid. At one point, I was wearing condoms and Lisa was on birth control because I was just like, and we were married. So that was very grateful for that. That combined with, now this starts really getting complicated, but you go off the gold standard and now you start to get inflation because the dollar's not pegged to anything. Women have to go into the workforce post World War II. It was like, yeah, obviously they can do it. They had to do it while men were away. So they now can, because they can control pregnancy. They've proven that they'll be effective. Social mores begin to change. People realize, oh my God, women are amazing. Men, women, like intelligence actually isn't evenly distributed, but in the sort of meat of the bell curve, you're going to find just an unimaginable amount of hyper intelligent, incredibly capable women. As it turns out, for people keeping score, you get more men on the genius and more men on the moron. And I mean that literally. So women are just a little more tightly compacted. But so they do incredibly well in school because they're higher in conscientiousness. They do great in the workforce because they're higher in conscientiousness. So now all of a sudden, there was a study that came out, I forget what year, that shows women under 30 that have no kids actually make 6 or 8% more than men, their male counterparts. And it's even more pronounced in New York. I think it was 16 or 17%. In LA, it's 12%. Two other major cities were 14%. So anyway, it's just women are really beginning to crush it. The catch is that women are hypergamous. So they date over and up. So they want women that make as much money as them or more than them. They want men as intelligent as them or more intelligent. And men now are feeling, if I'm right, that you need only make a man feel powerful in order to get him in a good place, they're not feeling more powerful. And I threw out the sort of directional stats from earlier that when a woman earns more than the man, there's more likely to be domestic abuse, more likely to be erectile dysfunction, higher rates of divorce, higher rates of female dissatisfaction. I mean, it just literally goes on and on. So now you are creating an environment where every step of the way, I'm like, that's amazing for women that they have control of their reproduction. That is literally amazing. That they are doing so well in the workforce. That is literally amazing. As somebody who employs incredibly gifted women that have helped me build an incredible company, I could not be more grateful to women being in the workforce. And yet, it's creating a problem where you get, as women are becoming fierce, independent women, and I know because I'm married to one, that don't need a man, and men need to be needed in order to feel powerful. We have created the ultimate cyclone of problems. And I don't know the way out of that, because if a woman doesn't want to have kids, she truly does not need a man. Mm-hmm. Now, there are two options that I can see before us. Three. One, shove the genie back in the bottle, radicalize
Wait, if
everybody.
women don't want to have kids, they don't need a man?
They literally don't need a man. The government will keep you safe.
But they want a man.
Yes, now you're getting into the problem. So you go girl, you don't need a man. do your thing, climb the ladder, and then and I wish I had this study. I don't know if I'm making this up, but I'm pretty sure that there is a study out there that says the most unhappy women are lawyers over 35, female lawyers over 35. And that makes sense. That to me is just running that rat race as somebody who has to, in my own life, constantly recontextualize why I do what I do, to reconnect emotionally to it. But I just have a literal pathological ambition. And I don't use the word pathological on accident. So women would not be optimized for that from an evolutionary standpoint. So I get why at 35, a percentage. Of course, this is a bell curve. And of course, there are women like my own wife that exist, that just isn't their call. I get it. I'm closer to that than I think people realize. But anyway, it becomes this cocktail of, yes, they don't need a man, but they want a man. But for a lot of people, the cultural narrative is such that they shouldn't want a man. So there's like weirdness around that. So anyway, there's three things that I see before us. You can try to shove the genie back in the bottle by promoting a more traditional lifestyle, which, mark my fucking words, is coming. It's going to come like an avalanche. People are already seeing the tip of that spear, but that shit is going to be a cacophony in 3 years. I just promise you. And then option number 2 is for men to just become more powerful. Suck it up, motherfuckers. Get better. I think they should, but I think they will hit a point where there's just only so many of them that can be equal or better than women that are just thriving in the system. So the ones that everybody should max 100%. And then the third one is basically women want less from your men, or women don't try to become as badass. Help. What the fuck do we do? Or am I just completely delusional?
I think you're off. And the reason I think you're off is because even if that trend reaches that place, I refute the idea that men are incapable of handling women doing interesting things or being more successful than them on certain metrics, like the status in their job or money.
What do you think is in the data then that's coming out that says it creates a host of problems, including the women being more dissatisfied?
I don't know. I can't speak to it. I look around me and I see so many people who are in my life that I can point to where the women in their life are on paper more successful, where they are higher up the hierarchy in their company, where they earn more. And these are not, as, if the kind of red pill community would have us believe that these are some kind of like beta pushover type guys who've just latched on to a successful woman and don't have any self-respect. They are the complete opposite. They are incredibly secure, and they are more than secure enough to be like, she's killing it and that's great. I'm doing my thing and I'm happy with that. They're also not people making zero money. They're not people who are just like, I haven't got a job and she goes out and pays the bills and whatever. They're just guys that aren't doing, in those terms, the same as the woman they're with. So the data is interesting. It's not what I'm seeing. I do think that there's a discussion to be had about the way that when women go on dates, I'm the person who gets the woman coming to me saying, I intimidate everyone. By the way, that's not all women, but there's often people who will raise their hand and say, everyone says I'm intimidating. Now, if a few people say you're intimidating, that's one thing. If everyone finds you intimidating, that I think is interesting information, because I think there is something in the way that you are connecting with people where you're not going in to truly connect. You're going in to impress or to control or show how accomplished you are, and you're kind of wearing all of that all the time. Some of the most successful people I know are not intimidating because they make people really feel at home and they make other people feel interesting. So I think we have to question what we're doing that makes everyone intimidated, but that's a different conversation. But I do think that's an important conversation to have. No, by the way, no different to the guy who on every date finds a way to mention, his Ferrari or his job or, how high flying he is. It's the same deal. But I refute the idea that men aren't capable of dating a woman who's doing more than them. I also think that many men who think they have an issue with that are adaptable and will adapt and will have to adapt to the fact that they're with really interesting people who are doing really great things, and they will have to find their source. It's not that they will have to give up on feeling powerful. It's that they will have to find the source of their power in other things. There is a little bit of a it's a bit of a heavy-handed approach that we've always relied on as men to having power, that I think when we're forced to adapt to find power in other ways, we will find power in other ways. And I don't think that women's need for men or a partner is going anywhere. I don't think that if a woman decides, I don't want kids, I don't think she's about to say, and I also don't want this thing that there is such a human drive for, which is love and companionship and connection. I don't think that is going anywhere. So my feeling is that I think men are having to adapt. I really do. I think us men are kind of having to grow up. We are not, the things that used to make us impressive are not nearly as impressive anymore. We are having to adapt to that already. And it's not enough that I'm the one who does the big complicated job and you don't understand it, and I come home and, oh, what a silly comment you just made, silly woman. I've got a complicated job and you don't understand it, and I'm the man of the house and I bring home the money. And that was a really easy way to get validation. And men are finding it less easy to get validation in all of those ways that they constructed it before. So I think that they already are having to get used to a world where their validation has to come from other things, has to come from the strength of character they have. It has to come from the strength of mind they have, from the way they make their partner feel, the way they show up for their partner. It's not enough that you bring home money for food. And that's a good thing. And I see that trend just continuing, where women are in their power, where men don't have to raise their game by making more money and getting more status so that they can stay on top, so to speak, but that they just simply reorganize where their sense of worth comes from in the context of a relationship. And that, I think, would be a fantastic thing. Because my life got better when I stopped basing my worth in my relationship on these things. And by the way, my life also got better when I found someone who didn't base my worth in those things and made me feel powerful in other ways. The way that I am here with you now, or communicating, or the way I'm passionate about my work, or the things that I get excited about, the way I show up in my life and I'm strong with my family, those are things that are really attractive to my wife. Now, there'll always be someone who says, oh yeah, and the fact that you're doing really well in life and blah, blah, blah. But I don't...
That jawline doesn't hurt, Matthew. I'll tell you right now.
But all the more reason, by the way, if you're a person who says, I don't have the jawline, I don't have the status, I don't have the thing, then you better develop power in other ways. You better. There's no other option. You better find your sense of worth and the source of your power in other ways. And I look at people in this life, like I look at, Eckhart Tolle, and I'm like, that's a powerful person. Like I don't look at him. He's not a stereotypically like Mr. Alpha male, looks the part, has the body, no. He does not tick those boxes in that way. But I see him as an incredibly powerful man. I think what he's done for himself makes him incredibly compelling. What he has achieved in his mind and the way the peace that he's found within himself and the way he's able to, he's not even like traditionally charismatic. Like, it's not, if you first listen to him speak, it's like, wait, people listen to this person for like 7 hours? He talks at a snail's pace. He leaves giant silences where he says nothing. And he's kind of got an odd way about him. And yet, people are spellbound when he sits there and he talks. And it's because he has found some other source of power than the ones that the rest of us are clamoring after, thinking that that's what's going to give us our significance. I think that people find a way, and men will have to find a way increasingly to build other muscles. And I think that will be good for their consciousness. Maybe there's a period of, rebellion and fighting against that. And I think when the trend continues, eventually people start adapting and using other muscles. And women will also have to use other muscles. They will have to, the ones that are overly focused on what I would think of as more, I'm afraid to use the word superficial at this stage, but, when they're looking at those kind of external markers of success or whatever it may be, which I refute the idea that all women are looking for that. I think that there's plenty of women that are just attracted to someone who's interesting and charismatic, and they truly have a guy's status or where he is in the food chain of a corporation or a business or whatever has absolutely no bearing on who they're choosing as a partner. And I see that, again, there's nothing that those communities can tell me that takes away my knowledge of how many women I know are with really interesting men who do not do as well as them in those ways. So the idea that, and actually do absolutely are not the provider in the relationship financially in that way. They provide, but not nearly as much as she does. And I can't ignore how many of those people that I know. But the women that do keep focusing on those other things, I think they will also inevitably have to start seeing the value in people in other ways. And that will be an adaptation for them too. So that would be my perhaps more optimistic take, is that if the trend you're talking about is true, and if it goes to the extreme that you're talking about, people will develop different muscles. And I think it's already being proven that they are. This conversation, like you and I having a conversation about feelings and healing, and granted, most of it's coming from me on that side, but we would not have been having this conversation for men 20 years ago. Like, the number of men who are actually starting to connect with therapy, their feelings, wanting to be more vulnerable, wanting to figure out their stuff, wanting to be introspective, or wanting to become more self-aware, that is already a tremendous shift to me. That's a tremendous adaptation that our fathers were not a part of, most of our fathers, unless they lived in certain parts of California. But most of them were not. It was a world away from where they were. The fact that we have men talking, the fact that you have Sean Strickland talking to Theo Von about his trauma as a child and crying on a podcast with Theo Von, and he is one of the most savage people on earth. That's an adaptation. And I think when you apply that across the board, we're already seeing men view themselves differently, derive their worth from other places. I think that so many of the communities are kind of like almost preaching a kind of regression of that, but I don't think that regression is going to win out. I think that the general, I hope to be a part of the opposite. I hope to be someone out there who can encourage people to embrace those adaptations. And I'm well aware, like I don't know who, I feel like I did a podcast somewhere before and it had a male audience, and it was like, there was a decent amount of red pill type comments in there, and it was good, easy for, here what do they call them? Chads? Is it Chads?
Chads, yeah.
Here, I'm really going to take advice from this Chad about how, and I'm like, okay, I promise you, you're not, if you're saying that about me, you're not giving credit to how strong my mind is. You have underestimated me. If you're reducing the way I think to advantages that you see me having, you fundamentally have misunderstood how powerful of a person I am, how powerful my mind is. You have fundamentally misunderstood what a survivor I am. And you also don't know anything about my life. So it's okay if you're not ready to hear that voice, or frankly, if you need it from someone else, that's okay too. Find someone who's saying the exact same things as me, who doesn't have those advantages or comes in a package that you find credible. Do that. Please do that. My audience is the majority women. Every year I have an all-female retreat. So, but if that's not enough, find someone who is saying the same things that's in an acceptable package for you. The truth is the same. It is exactly the same. And I really hope if I can do like a little, this isn't even like, if I'm here to talk about this book, and by the way, the biggest audience for this book is going to be women. There will be men who buy this book, and I promise you, if you're a guy, you're going to get a ton out of this book.
Well, the very healthy book is Love Life by Matthew Hussey. Where can people get it?
We have a link, lovelifebook.com. Not only can you order a copy of the book, but we have a big live event that we're doing on May the 4th for anyone who buys a book, which is really cool. The book is your ticket to the event. It's virtual, so you can join the event from anywhere in the world. And it's going to be a lot of fun. My wife's going to be there with me. We're going to have fun just chatting with people and coaching and bringing the book to life for anyone who really wants to find love. It's going to be an amazing event. And like I said, it's not, you can't buy your way onto the event. It's literally the only way to be there is to grab a copy of the book. And you can do that at lovelifebook.com, and you'll see a space there where when you get your receipt, whether it's from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or anywhere else, you could put the confirmation code in on that page, lovelifebook.com, and you'll get an email with the details of how you can, the registration link for the event and how you can join. So yeah.
I love it. All right, everybody. I love this guy to death. I highly encourage you to register for the event, get the book. And speaking of things you ought to do, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace.
If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more.
We are attracted to men that fulfill their potential. If your motivation for becoming rich is getting more women, you have to think about the quality of women. If it takes money to access her, you are replaceable.
And I want to start with a quote from you, if I may. What social media is doing, what this woke culture is